Have you ever noticed how the deepest love stories don't begin with another person walking in? They begin with everyone else walking out. Quietly. Painfully. Sometimes without explanation. One day, your phone stops lighting up the way it used to. The conversations become shorter. The invitations slow down. The people who once felt close suddenly feel far away. And at first you blame yourself. You wonder, did I become too much? Did I lose my warmth? Why does it feel like life is removing everyone from me? But what if your solitude was never punishment? What if the silence that almost broke you was actually protecting you? What if every lonely night, every unanswered message, every season where you had to sit with your own heartbeat in the dark was clearing emotional space for a connection your soul had not yet learned how to hold? Not just any connection. Your twin flame. The person who would not enter your life to distract you from your wounds, but to mirror them, to awaken them, to make you face everything you buried under being strong. Chosen one, your solitude was sacred. It was not emptiness. It was preparation. And in this video, we're going to unfold the hidden reason why you had to be alone before your twin flame could truly meet you. Not just physically, but energetically, emotionally, spiritually. Because sometimes, before divine love arrives, life first removes every false version of love you were still clinging to. And once you understand this, you may never look at your loneliness the same way again. Chapter 1. The loneliness that felt like rejection was actually separation from what could not come with you. I used to think loneliness meant something was wrong with me. I really did. I thought maybe I had become too quiet, too sensitive, too intense, too hard to understand. There were seasons when I would look at my phone and feel this strange heaviness in my chest, not because there was bad news, but because there was nothing. No message. No invitation. No, I was thinking about you. No small sign that someone out there still felt connected to me. And that kind of silence can make even the strongest soul question everything. You start replaying conversations. You wonder if you said too much, or not enough. You wonder if your energy changed. You wonder if people felt something in you shifting before you even understood it yourself. And slowly, without anyone announcing it, life starts to become quieter. The people you used to run to no longer feel available. The conversations that once made you feel seen start to feel shallow. You sit across from someone you used to feel close to, and something inside you whispers, "This doesn't feel like home anymore." But you don't want to admit it. So you laugh at the right times. You answer the messages. You keep showing up in rooms where your spirit feels tired. You try to convince yourself nothing has changed. But something has changed. You have changed. And when you are one of the chosen ones, that change often begins with separation. Not the dramatic kind at first. Not always a betrayal. Not always a fight. Sometimes it is softer than that. More confusing. More painful in its quietness. People just begin to drift. Plans don't happen. Texts become shorter. The warmth becomes inconsistent. You feel yourself becoming a stranger in places where you once felt wanted. And the first instinct is to take it personally. You think, why am I being left out? Why does nobody check on me the way I check on them? Why do I always have to be the one who reaches first? Why does it feel like I'm disappearing from everyone's life? Pause for a moment. Feel that, because maybe you know exactly what I mean. Maybe you have been in that season where your room feels too quiet at night, where the world keeps moving, but your life feels suspended, where everyone seems to have someone somewhere, something to belong to, and you are left sitting with your own thoughts, trying not to spiral. There is a particular kind of loneliness that comes before a sacred connection. It does not feel sacred while it is happening. It feels like rejection. It feels like punishment. It feels like life is slowly emptying your hands and giving you no explanation. But what if that loneliness was not proof that love had abandoned you? What if it was proof that false attachments were being removed? What if the silence that hurt you so deeply was not emptiness but clearing? A sacred clearing. A space being made. A space your twin flame could not enter while your heart was still crowded with people, patterns, and emotional agreements that were never aligned with who you were becoming. Because here is the uncomfortable part. Sometimes we call something love simply because it is familiar. We call it connection because it has history. We call it loyalty because we are afraid to outgrow it. We call it friendship because we have known them for years. We call it chemistry because the anxiety feels alive. We call it destiny because the attachment is hard to break. But your soul knows the difference. Your body knows the difference. Have you ever noticed how certain people leave you feeling drained, even when nothing obvious happened? You get home after seeing them, and you feel tired in a way sleep cannot fix. Your shoulders are tense. Your mind is noisy. You replay the conversation and realize you were performing the whole time. Performing peace. Performing ease. Performing the version of yourself they are comfortable with. Maybe you had to make yourself smaller around them. Maybe you had to hide your depth. Maybe every time you spoke from your heart, they changed the subject, made a joke, or looked at you like you were being too much. And because you loved them or wanted to keep them, you adjusted. You lowered your emotional volume. You swallowed the deeper truth. You became easier to digest. But chosen one's sacred love cannot meet you in a life where you are still pretending. Your twin flame does not come to meet the version of you that knows how to survive social approval. They come to meet the version of you that is finally honest. Raw. Awake. Unmasked. And that is why solitude often comes first. Not to punish you. To remove the audience. To take away the people you were unconsciously performing for. To quiet the noise long enough for you to hear your own spirit again. There may have been people in your life who only knew the older version of you. The version who overgave. The version who laughed when something hurt. The version who stayed available to people who were never truly present. The version who would answer immediately, apologize first, explain too much, and make peace even when your heart was breaking. They loved your usefulness, your warmth, your emotional labor, your ability to understand them. But when you started needing space, when you started becoming honest, when you stopped chasing, something shifted. They did not know what to do with the version of you that had boundaries. They did not recognize the version of you that no longer begged to be included. They missed the old access, not necessarily the real you. And that realization hurts. It hurts in a quiet, humiliating way. You start asking yourself, was I loved, or was I just convenient? That question can break something open inside you. But it can also set you free. There is a kind of solitude that begins when you stop betraying yourself for belonging. At first, it feels terrifying. You may feel guilty for not reaching out. You may feel selfish for choosing peace. You may feel cold for letting certain conversations fade. You may even miss people who were not good for you, simply because their presence filled space. That is the emotional contradiction of sacred separation. You can know someone is no longer aligned and still grieve them. You can feel relieved and heartbroken at the same time. You can stop wanting to go back and still miss what you wish they could have been. Healing is rarely clean. It comes with memory, with tenderness, with strange moments where you almost text someone, not because they deserve access, but because loneliness makes old patterns look comforting. You pick up the phone. You type the message. Then you pause. Your thumb hovers over the screen. Your chest tightens. And something deeper than pride says, don't go back just because it is quiet. That moment matters. That pause is sacred. That is the space being protected. You see, before your twin flame can enter your life in a way that does not destroy you, your emotional field has to be cleared of everything that keeps you addicted to almost love. People who only reach for you when they are lonely. People who enjoy your energy but avoid your depth. People who make you question your worth through inconsistency. People who want your light but do not respect your sensitivity. People who keep you emotionally open while remaining spiritually unavailable. Those connections take up space, even when they are not physically present. They live in your nervous system. They live in your expectations. They live in the little hope you keep hidden. They live in the part of you that says, maybe one day they will finally see me. But sacred love cannot fully arrive while your soul is still waiting to be chosen by what already failed to honor you. So life begins removing. Sometimes gently. Sometimes painfully. Sometimes through silence. Sometimes through betrayal. Sometimes through exhaustion. Sometimes through one final conversation that shows you exactly what you needed to see. And yes, it hurts. It may feel like your world is getting smaller. But in reality, your spirit is becoming less cluttered. You are being brought back to yourself. Think about a room that has been full for years. Old boxes stacked in the corners, clothes that no longer fit, letters from people who left, objects you kept because they once meant something, dust gathering around memories you were too afraid to touch. From the outside, the room looks full. But fullness is not the same as life. Sometimes the room has to be emptied before it can become a sanctuary. Your solitude was that emptying. The universe was walking through the rooms of your heart and asking, does this still belong here? Does this still reflect who you are becoming? Is this love, or is this attachment? Is this connection, or is this fear of being alone? Is this person nourishing your soul, or only occupying space? And maybe for a long time, you did not want to answer. Most of us don't. Because answering honestly means grieving. It means admitting that some people were only able to meet the version of you that did not know your worth yet. It means accepting that not everyone who walked with you in one season can enter the next. It means realizing that loneliness may be the cost of no longer abandoning yourself. That is a heavy truth, but it is also a holy one. Your twin flame connection is not just about romance. It is not just about longing, eye contact, synchronicities, or the electric feeling of recognition. Those things may happen. They may shake you. They may open something ancient inside you. But before any of that can be held with maturity, you have to become spacious. Not empty. Spacious. There is a difference. Empty means abandoned. Spacious means available. Available for truth. Available for healing. Available for a love that does not have to compete with your past. Available for someone whose presence does not simply excite your wounds, but invites your soul to rise. And perhaps this is why your solitude felt so intense. It was not ordinary loneliness. It was initiation. It was the sacred discomfort of becoming someone who can no longer live on the surface. You were being separated from noise, from emotional crumbs, from people who only understood your mask, from old versions of love that taught you to chase, shrink, perform, and wait. And even though it felt like rejection, something deeper was happening. Your life was creating room for a connection that would require your full presence, your full honesty, your full heart. Not the heart that is fragmented across 10 unfinished attachments. Not the heart still begging the past to explain itself. Not the heart still proving its worth to people committed to misunderstanding it. The whole heart, the returning heart. The heart that has sat in silence long enough to know what is real. So when people left, maybe they were not always rejecting you. Maybe they were revealing that they could not travel where your soul was going. When the invitations stopped, maybe life was teaching you to stop looking for belonging in rooms that required self-abandonment. When the phone went quiet, maybe you were being invited to hear the voice within you that had been drowned out for years. And when loneliness wrapped itself around your nights, maybe it was not there to destroy you. Maybe it was guarding the doorway, protecting the space, keeping your heart from filling the emptiness with another lesson disguised as love. Chosen one, your solitude was sacred. Not pretty, not easy, not instantly peaceful. Sacred. It cleared what was false. It exposed what was draining you. It revealed who only loved your availability, not your essence. It taught you that being alone is not the same as being unloved. Sometimes being alone means your soul has finally stopped negotiating with what cannot meet you. And the love that is meant for you. The love that recognizes you beyond performance. The love that feels your silence instead of punishing it. The love that meets your depth without asking you to become lighter, simpler, or easier. That kind of love needs space. And whether your twin flame is already in your life, separated from you, approaching you, or being prepared in their own silence. This chapter of solitude was not wasted. It was clearing the room. It was softening your grip. It was teaching you how to stop calling every absence abandonment. Some absences are protection. Some endings are preparation. Some lonely seasons are not the universe taking love away. They are the universe refusing to let anything false sit in the seat reserved for what is real. So let this settle gently. The loneliness that felt like rejection may have been the first sacred sign that your life was making space for a love your old self could not have held. Not yet. Not with all that noise. Not with all those unfinished emotional debts. Not while you were still choosing people who made you feel chosen only in fragments. And now, as the silence begins to reveal its meaning, another question rises beneath the surface. If life had to remove everyone who could not come with you, what part of you were you still abandoning just to keep them close? Lesson of this chapter. Loneliness is not always proof that love has left you. Sometimes it is the sacred clearing that happens before real love can finally find you. The people, patterns, and almost connections that disappeared may not have been taken from you to hurt you. They may have been removed because they could not hold the depth of who you were becoming. Your solitude was not emptiness. It was preparation. And before your twin flame could meet you in truth, life first had to separate you from everything that taught you to abandon yourself for connection. Chapter 2. You had to meet the version of yourself you kept avoiding. There is an uncomfortable truth about solitude that nobody really prepares you for. At first, you think the hardest part will be missing other people. Missing their voice, their presence, their routine. The way your life used to feel when you could distract yourself with someone else's energy. But then the silence deepens. The room gets still. The phone stays quiet. And slowly, painfully, you realize the hardest person to sit with is not the person who left. It is you. The version of you that you kept avoiding. The version that only comes forward when nobody else is around to distract you. The version that has been waiting beneath the noise, beneath the chasing, beneath the overthinking. Beneath the spiritual explanations, beneath the late-night scrolling, beneath the messages you typed and deleted. That version. The one who is not fully healed. The one who still gets scared. The one who still remembers exactly how it felt when someone's energy changed and they never explained why. The one who says, "I'm fine," but feels the body tighten when a message goes unanswered. The one who can act detached in public, then break down quietly at night over a memory nobody else would understand. I know that version. Maybe you do too. Maybe you have had nights where you were not even crying loudly. You were just lying there, staring at the ceiling, feeling this dull ache in your chest like your heart was tired of trying to be mature about everything. No dramatic breakdown. No loud sobbing. Just a quiet emotional exhaustion. The kind where you whisper to yourself, "Why does this still hurt me?" And that question can feel humiliating, especially when you thought you were stronger than this. You thought you had evolved past needing reassurance. You thought you had outgrown the old wounds. You thought you were too spiritual, too self-aware, too awakened to be triggered by silence. Then one small thing happens. A delayed reply. A cold tone. A familiar song. A dream that feels too real. A place you pass by without meaning to. And suddenly, the body remembers what the mind tried to overcome. Your stomach drops. Your chest tightens. Your throat closes. Your nervous system goes back to a moment you thought you had survived. That is the thing about sacred solitude. It does not just remove people from your life. It removes the distractions that helped you avoid your own emotional truth. And once those distractions are gone, you finally begin to see what was living inside you. Not the polished version. Not the strong version. Not the version that gives good advice to everyone else. The real one. The one who is still asking quietly, "Am I safe? Am I lovable? Will people stay if I stop performing? Will I still be chosen if I stop proving? Will love still find me if I stop chasing it?" Pause there, because those questions are not weakness. They are wounds speaking. And for a long time, you may have mistaken your wounds for your personality. Maybe you thought you were just passionate. But sometimes passion was panic wearing a beautiful name. Maybe you thought you were just loyal. But sometimes loyalty was fear of abandonment dressed as devotion. Maybe you thought you were intuitive. But sometimes you were not sensing divine signs. You were scanning for danger, reading tone, counting minutes between replies, watching someone's face for the smallest shift, feeling their distance before they even said a word. And your body would react immediately. A little heat in the face, a pressure in the chest, A sudden urge to fix something. A need to send one more message. A need to explain yourself better. A need to make them understand you before they disappear. That is not love. That is survival. Raw honesty. A lot of us did not learn love as peace. We learned love as uncertainty. We learned to associate connection with tension, with waiting, with guessing, with earning, with trying harder when someone became distant. So when solitude arrived, it did not feel peaceful at first. It felt wrong. Too quiet. Too empty. Too unfamiliar. You may have said you wanted peace, but when peace actually came, your nervous system did not know what to do with it. No drama to decode. No mixed signals to analyze. No one to chase. No emotional high to keep you distracted. Just silence. And in that silence, the parts of you that had been hidden under attachment began to speak. Maybe you realized you were not just missing a person. You were missing the feeling of being wanted. Maybe you realized you were not just heartbroken. You were addicted to the hope that someone emotionally unavailable would finally become consistent. Maybe you realized you were not just spiritual about your twin flame connection. You were also afraid that without them, you would never feel that deeply again. That is hard to admit. It is much easier to say, this is a divine bond. It is harder to say, this bond also exposed the places where I do not feel whole without being chosen. Both can be true. That is the emotional contradiction of the twin flame journey. It can be sacred and triggering, beautiful and brutal, a mirror and a wound, a soul recognition and a nervous system activation. It can awaken your highest self and expose your youngest pain. And solitude is where you finally stop running from that contradiction. You stop pretending it was only about them. You start seeing yourself, the patterns, the reactions, the hunger, the fear under the longing, the ache beneath the spiritual language. You begin to ask deeper questions. Not, why did they leave? But, what did their leaving awaken in me? Not, when will they come back? But, why does their absence make me feel like I have lost myself? Not, do they feel this too? But, why do I need their feeling to validate mine? Those questions are not easy. They can make you feel exposed. They strip away the fantasy that healing is always soft music, candles, and gentle affirmations. Sometimes healing is sitting on the edge of your bed at 2:13 a.m., realizing you have been abandoning yourself in the name of love. Sometimes healing is not texting them, even though your whole body wants relief. Sometimes healing is letting the silence be uncomfortable without rushing to fill it with someone who cannot meet you. Sometimes healing is admitting, I do not miss the chaos, but I do miss the version of me that still believed they might choose me differently. That kind of honesty changes you. Quietly. Deeply. Not all at once. You start noticing things. You notice how often you reach for your phone when you feel empty. You notice how quickly your mind creates stories when someone pulls away. You notice how your body reacts to inconsistency before your heart can make excuses. You notice how much energy you once spent trying to be understood by people who benefited from misunderstanding you. And maybe for the first time, you do not judge yourself. You simply observe. Softly. Like you are finally sitting beside the wounded part of you instead of criticizing it. You say, of course you were scared. Of course silence felt dangerous. Of course inconsistency felt familiar. Of course you chased love when love had always felt like something you had to earn. That is not weakness. That is self-recognition. And self-recognition is one of the first real gifts of sacred solitude. Before your twin flame can mirror you, life makes you meet your own reflection. Not the reflection you show to the world. The hidden one. The one behind your reactions. The one behind your longing. The one behind the way you pretend not to care, then check if they watched your story. The one behind the way you say, I'm done, then secretly hope they can feel your absence. The one behind the way you crave peace, but feel anxious when nothing is happening. The one behind the way you call it surrender, while still waiting for a sign. Let's be honest. Sometimes we do not want healing. We want relief. We want the message, the apology, the reunion, the sudden realization from them. The moment where they come back and say, I finally understand. I should have chosen you. I was scared. I felt it too. And maybe one day there will be a conversation. Maybe one day there will be clarity. Maybe one day the connection will mature enough to hold truth without running from it. But solitude asks a different question first. Can you give yourself the love you keep waiting for them to return with? Can you sit with your own heart without needing someone else to calm it? Can you stop using reunion as proof that the connection mattered? Can you believe your own experience without needing them to validate it? That is where the chosen one begins to mature. Not through pretending not to care. Not through becoming cold. Not through saying, I don't need anyone. That is not healing. That is armor. Real healing is much quieter. It sounds like, I still care, but I will not abandon myself to be close to you. I still feel this, but I will not let the feeling control my life. I still miss you, but I am learning not to turn missing into chasing. I still remember, but I am no longer living inside the memory. That is sacred. That is strength. The kind nobody claps for. The kind that happens in private. In the kitchen while making coffee alone. In the car when a song almost breaks you, but you breathe through it. In the shower when tears come unexpectedly, and you do not shame them. In the middle of the day when you feel the urge to check on someone, and instead you place your hand on your chest and ask, what am I really needing right now? Most people never ask that question. They just reach outward. For distraction. For validation. For another person to quiet the storm. But you, chosen one, were placed in solitude long enough to learn the language of your own ache. You began to understand that your longing was not always about your twin flame. Sometimes it was about the child in you who wanted someone to stay. Sometimes it was about the younger version of you who learned to be impressive to be loved. Sometimes it was about the part of you that felt invisible unless someone desired you. Sometimes it was about grief that had been waiting for a quiet enough room to finally surface. And when that grief came up, it may have shocked you. You thought you were healing from one person. But suddenly you were crying over every time you felt left behind. Every time you were chosen last. Every time you had to be strong too early. Every time someone made you feel difficult for having needs. Every time you stayed silent to avoid being too much. That is the deeper revelation. Twin flame solitude does not only heal the connection. It heals the history beneath your reaction to the connection. It takes you back to the root. To the first place where love became uncertain. To the first moment you learned to monitor people's moods. To the first wound that made emotional distance feel like danger. And yes, that can feel unbearable. There are days when healing feels like being split open. Days when you wonder if you are going backwards. Days when you think, why am I feeling everything now? Here is the quiet answer. Your system finally feels safe enough to release what it once had to suppress. For years, you may have been surviving, functioning, performing, moving forward, smiling, creating, helping others, holding it together. But solitude slowed you down. It took away the emotional noise. It gave your pain enough room to rise. Not to destroy you. To leave you. Pain cannot leave a body that never lets itself feel. Grief cannot soften if it is always interrupted. The wound cannot be witnessed if you keep filling every silent space with another person's presence. So life gave you silence. Not as cruelty. As an invitation. An invitation to meet yourself without the mask. And at some point, something subtle shifts. You stop asking, who left me? You begin asking, where did I leave myself? That question changes the entire journey. You remember the moments you ignored your intuition. The times your body knew something was wrong, but you explained it away. The times you accepted less because you were afraid there would be nothing else. The times you waited for someone to become ready while your own life stood still. The times you betrayed your peace to keep a connection alive. And there is grief in that realization. But also power. Because once you can see where you left yourself, you can begin returning. Little by little. You return when you stop apologizing for needing clarity. You return when you no longer mistake anxiety for passion. You return when you let silence reveal someone instead of rushing to repair it. You return when you stop asking unavailable people to prove your worth. You return when you choose your nervous system over the emotional high. You return when you can say, I love deeply, but I will not disappear. That is what solitude was teaching you. Not how to be alone forever. How to be with yourself so fully that love no longer becomes a place where you abandon your center. And this matters for the twin flame journey more than most people understand. Because when your twin flame appears or reappears, the connection can be powerful. A single look can shake you. A conversation can feel like a doorway. Their silence can feel louder than someone else's confession. Their presence can wake up parts of you that were sleeping for years. Without self-awareness, you may confuse activation with destiny and lose yourself in the intensity. But after solitude, you pause. You listen to your body. You ask better questions. Not just, do I feel something? But, does this connection invite me into truth? Am I becoming more myself here, or less? Is this love expanding me, or making me chase? Is my soul awake, or is my wound activated? Can I honor the connection without abandoning my peace? Those are mature questions. Those are sacred questions. Those are the questions solitude gives you the courage to ask. And maybe this is why your alone season was so long. Not because you were forgotten. Not because you were unworthy. Not because love was delayed as punishment. You were being brought into emotional honesty. You were learning the difference between your intuition and your fear. Between your soul's knowing and your nervous system's alarm. Between love and longing. Between connection and dependence. Between missing someone and needing them to complete you. That kind of clarity cannot be rushed. It is formed in silence. In the moments when nobody is watching. When there is no one to impress. No one to chase. No one to blame. Just you, your breath, your memories, your ache, and the small trembling truth rising inside you. I have been looking for myself in other people. That realization is not the end. It is the beginning. Because the moment you stop running from yourself, your energy begins to change. Not loudly. Not in a way everyone will notice right away. But deeply. You become less desperate to be understood by people committed to staying shallow. You become less available for emotional confusion. You become less afraid of silence. You stop treating loneliness like an emergency. You begin to feel the difference between being alone and being abandoned. You begin to understand that solitude is not the absence of love. Sometimes it is the place where love finally becomes honest. So if this chapter of your life has forced you to meet the version of yourself you kept avoiding, do not shame what you find there. Do not shame the anxious part. The tender part, the jealous part, the part that still misses them, the part that checks, the part that hopes, the part that wants to be chosen so badly it scares you. Sit with that part. Speak gently to it. Tell it, you do not have to chase anymore. You do not have to perform anymore. You do not have to turn pain into proof that you are unlovable. You do not have to beg someone's silence to explain your worth. This is where healing begins. Not when you stop feeling. When you stop abandoning yourself for feeling. Chosen one, your solitude made you face yourself because your twin flame journey was never only about finding the other half. It was about becoming whole enough to meet love without collapsing into it. It was about learning to hold your own heart before handing it to someone who mirrors everything inside you. It was about becoming honest enough to say, I want union but not at the cost of myself. That sentence carries power. Quiet power. The kind that changes the entire frequency of a connection. Because once you stop running from yourself, something begins to shift before anything outside you changes. Your silence becomes different. Your longing becomes cleaner. Your love becomes less frantic. Your energy becomes quieter. And a quiet energy can recognize what chaos never could. Peace. Truth. A love that does not require you to abandon your own soul to be chosen by another. But this is only the beginning. Because once you finally stop running from yourself, once you sit with the ache and survive it, once you realize that silence will not kill you, something strange begins to happen. Your energy changes before your life does. And when your energy becomes quiet enough, you begin to recognize real love differently. Not by how intensely it shakes you, but by how deeply it lets you breathe. Lesson of this chapter. Solitude teaches you that healing is not about becoming someone new. It is about finally sitting beside the parts of yourself you kept leaving behind. The anxious part, the tender part, the part that still hopes, the part that still remembers, the part that mistook chasing for love because silence once felt unsafe. You had to meet yourself before your twin flame could truly meet you. Not the performed self, the honest self. And once you stop running from that version of you, your energy begins to soften, deepen, and clear. That is when you become ready to recognize love without losing yourself inside it. Chapter 3. Your energy had to become quiet enough to recognize real love. I remember reaching a point where I no longer wanted attention. Not the kind of attention I used to mistake for love. Not the late-night message that made my heart jump for 3 seconds, then left me anxious for 3 days. Not the inconsistent warmth that made me feel chosen one moment and forgotten the next. Not the chemistry that felt like lightning, but somehow always left my nervous system shaking afterward. I wanted peace. Real peace. The kind you don't have to perform for. The kind that doesn't make you check your phone every 5 minutes. The kind that doesn't punish you with silence. The kind where your body does not feel like it has to prepare for impact every time someone's mood changes. And maybe you know that feeling too. Maybe there was a season when you thought you wanted the intense connection more than anything. You wanted the spark, the pull, the eye contact that felt like it reached somewhere behind your ribs. The messages that arrived at exactly the right time. The strange synchronicities. The feeling that this person was not just a person, but a doorway. A doorway into something deeper. Something ancient. Something you could not explain without sounding a little irrational. But then the same connection that awakened you also exhausted you. One moment, you felt seen in a way you had never felt before. The next, you felt abandoned in a way that touched every wound you thought you had healed. And that contrast can confuse the soul. It can make you ask questions you are almost afraid to answer. Is this love, or am I attached to the intensity? Is this my intuition, or is my nervous system panicking? Is this soul recognition, or am I romanticizing someone who keeps triggering my fear? Why does something that feels so sacred also make me feel so unstable? Pause there. Because that question is not weakness. That question is maturity beginning. For a long time, you may have believed real love had to feel overwhelming to be real. You may have thought that if your heart was not racing, if your mind was not spinning, if your body was not buzzing with uncertainty, then maybe the connection was not deep enough. A lot of us were taught to confuse emotional activation with destiny. Not intentionally. It happened slowly. Through childhood patterns. Through past relationships. Through people who loved us inconsistently. Through moments where affection came after anxiety. Through connections where warmth had to be earned, closeness had to be chased. And reassurance came only after we had almost broken ourselves trying to be understood. So when someone calm appears, someone steady, someone kind, someone who does not make you guess where you stand, a strange thing can happen. Your heart may not know what to do with them. Your body may call peace boring. Your mind may search for a problem. You may start wondering, why don't I feel the same panic? Why am I not obsessing? Why does this feel too easy? That is how wounded love teaches us to distrust safety. It makes chaos feel familiar. It makes peace feel suspicious. It makes emotional availability feel less exciting than someone who gives you just enough to keep hoping. Raw honesty? Sometimes we do not chase people because they are our destiny. Sometimes we chase them because their distance activates the oldest part of us that still wants to finally be chosen. And that is why your energy had to become quiet. Not cold. Not detached in a fake spiritual way. Quiet. There is a difference. Cold energy says, I don't need anyone. Quiet energy says, I no longer abandon myself to be loved. Cold energy builds walls. Quiet energy builds discernment. Cold energy pretends not to care. Quiet energy cares deeply, but does not collapse. And solitude was teaching you that difference. In the silence, your emotional field began to settle. At first, it may have felt uncomfortable. You may have felt restless, like you were waiting for something to happen, waiting for a message, waiting for a sign, waiting for your twin flame to feel you, waiting for the universe to confirm that the pain meant something. But slowly, if you allowed the silence to do its work, something began to change inside you. You started noticing what gave you peace. And what took it? You started noticing how certain conversations left you expanded, while others left you drained. You started noticing how your body responded before your mind could create excuses. A tight chest, a clenched jaw, a small twist in your stomach, a sudden need to explain yourself, a strange fatigue after being around someone. Then, with other people, the opposite. Your shoulders softened. Your breath slowed down. You did not feel the need to impress. You did not rehearse your words before speaking. Silence did not feel like punishment. Eye contact did not feel like a test. It felt safe. And that was new. Maybe even unfamiliar. Because when your nervous system has been trained by inconsistency, safety can feel almost too quiet to trust. You keep waiting for the shift, the withdrawal, the hidden meaning, the sudden coldness, the moment where someone makes you feel foolish for opening your heart. So instead of receiving peace, you inspect it. You question it. You look for cracks. But sacred solitude teaches you to stop using fear as your emotional compass. It teaches you to ask, is this my intuition warning me? Or is this my wound expecting the past to repeat? That question can change your entire life. Because intuition is usually calm. Fear is usually urgent. Intuition whispers. Fear screams. Intuition gives you a grounded knowing. Fear creates 1,000 stories in 5 minutes. Intuition may tell you, something is not aligned here. Fear says, you are about to be abandoned. Fix it now. Send the message. Explain more. Hold tighter. Don't let them leave. And before your energy became quiet, maybe you could not tell the difference. Maybe every trigger felt like a sign. Every dream felt like confirmation. Every ache felt like proof. Every coincidence became something to decode. Every silence became a spiritual test. But after enough solitude, after enough nights of sitting with yourself instead of running back into the old cycle, your inner world became less noisy. Not perfect. Not healed in some unrealistic, emotionless way. Just clearer. You began to understand that not every intense feeling is guidance. Sometimes it is grief. Sometimes it is attachment. Sometimes it is the body remembering someone who once made love feel uncertain. Sometimes it is the ego trying to turn pain into meaning too quickly because sitting with the rawness feels unbearable. And sometimes it is soul recognition. But now you can feel the difference more honestly. Twin flame recognition is not always frantic. It may be powerful, yes. It may feel impossible to ignore. It may come with a strange familiarity, like you are meeting someone and remembering them at the same time. But real recognition does not require you to abandon your dignity. It does not ask you to lose your center. It does not demand that you turn into someone who waits, watches, begs, decodes, and disappears. A sacred bond may awaken you. But it should not become an excuse to betray yourself. That is the deeper revelation. Your energy had to quiet down so you could stop calling every emotional earthquake divine love. Sometimes the soul recognizes someone, and sometimes the wound recognizes a pattern. Both can feel magnetic. Both can pull you in. Both can make your body react. But one leads you deeper into truth. The other keeps you circling the same pain with prettier language. This is where many chosen ones get tested. Not by whether they can feel deeply. You already can. You feel everything. You feel shifts in tone. You feel distance before it is spoken. You feel the emotional temperature of a room. You feel when someone is not saying what they really mean. You feel when a goodbye is hiding inside a conversation. Your sensitivity was never the problem. The real lesson was learning how to interpret your sensitivity without letting old wounds hijack it. Because being sensitive does not automatically mean every feeling is truth. Sometimes your sensitivity is picking up on danger. Sometimes it is picking up on possibility. Sometimes it is picking up on your own fear. Sometimes it is picking up on someone else's unresolved energy. And solitude teaches you to pause before reacting. That pause is everything. Before, you may have felt the shift and immediately chased. You sent the long message. You asked, "Are we okay?" You tried to soften your tone. You tried to become easier. You tried to fix the energy before the other person had to take responsibility for their part. But now, you breathe. You wait. You observe. You let people reveal themselves. You let your body speak, but you do not let panic drive. You say quietly, "I can feel this, but I do not have to run after it." That is growth. That is spiritual maturity in a human body. Not floating above pain. Not pretending you are unaffected. But feeling the activation and choosing not to become it. There is something sacred about the moment you realize you no longer want love that feels like withdrawal symptoms. You no longer want to be high on someone's attention and sick from their absence. You no longer want your entire mood determined by whether they reached out. You no longer want to confuse being triggered with being chosen. You want something deeper now. Something cleaner. A connection that can hold emotion without becoming chaos. A connection where silence can be soft. Where distance does not automatically mean danger. Where eye contact feels grounding, not consuming. Where you can be seen without performing. Where you can speak honestly without fearing that one vulnerable sentence will make them leave. That kind of love requires a different version of you. A quieter version. A version who has learned that peace is not the absence of passion. Peace is the foundation that allows passion to become safe. Read that again in your spirit. Peace is not the absence of passion. Peace is what allows passion to become safe. Because without peace, passion turns into obsession. Without grounding, chemistry turns into dependence. Without self-trust, soul recognition turns into emotional collapse. Without inner stillness, you may meet your twin flame and still experience the connection through fear. That is why the solitude came first. It was teaching you how to become a safe place for your own intensity. Before love could come close, you had to learn how not to disappear inside it. Before your twin flame could mirror you, you had to learn how to stand in front of the mirror without breaking. Before real love could stay, your system had to stop confusing chaos with proof. And maybe you're still learning this. Maybe part of you still misses the rush, the uncertainty, the emotional high, the feeling of being pulled towards someone so strongly that logic could not compete. There is no shame in that. The body can crave what it is used to, even when the soul is ready for something healthier. You can miss the intensity and still choose peace. You can feel the pull and still protect your center. You can love someone deeply and still refuse to make their inconsistency your home. That is emotional maturity. It is not dramatic. It is not always visible. Sometimes it looks like sitting alone with your phone face down, breathing through the urge, letting the silence stay silent. Not because you do not care, because you finally care about yourself too. Sometimes it looks like meeting someone kind and not sabotaging it just because they do not activate your anxiety. Sometimes it looks like allowing calm affection to feel unfamiliar without calling it wrong. Sometimes it looks like saying, "My body is not panicking, maybe this is what safety feels like." Softly, carefully, with a little disbelief. Because safety can feel strange when you have lived so long in survival. A person who is emotionally available may not give you the same adrenaline as someone who keeps you guessing. They may not trigger the same obsessive loop. They may not make you feel like you have to win them. And at first, your wounded self may think something is missing. But maybe what is missing is fear. Maybe what is missing is the chase. Maybe what is missing is the familiar ache of being almost chosen. Maybe what is missing is the emotional instability you once mistook for spiritual depth. That realization can be both freeing and sobering, because it means you now have to learn a new language of love, one that does not rely on panic, one that does not need inconsistency to feel meaningful, one that does not confuse longing with devotion, one that allows desire and peace to exist in the same room. That is the kind of love your solitude was preparing you for. Not a flat love, not a boring love, not a love without mystery, a love with depth that does not destroy your nervous system, a love where the sacred does not have to be chaotic, a love where your heart can open without your body bracing for loss. A love where you can feel the soul connection and still remain grounded in your own life. And when your twin flame energy approaches this quieter version of you, everything changes. You no longer meet the connection as a starving person looking for proof. You meet it as someone who has sat with their hunger and learned what it was really asking for. You no longer ask, will they choose me? You ask, can this connection meet me in truth? You no longer ask, do they feel what I feel? You ask, are both of us capable of honoring what we feel with maturity? You no longer ask, how do I make them stay? You ask, can I stay with myself no matter what they do? That is power. Not control. Power. The power of a soul that no longer hands its peace to someone else's uncertainty. And this is where real recognition begins. Not in the noise. Not in the fantasy. Not in the emotional storm. In the quiet. When your spirit is no longer begging. When your body is no longer addicted to fear. When your heart is still tender, still open, still capable of loving deeply, but no longer willing to confuse pain with destiny. Then you can look at someone and feel clearly. You can sense the difference between attraction and alignment. Between chemistry and compatibility. Between a lesson and a love. Between someone who awakens your soul and someone who only activates your wound. And sometimes, yes, the twin flame will still stir both. That is part of the mystery. The connection may still bring up fear. It may still expose hidden wounds. It may still challenge every illusion you had about love. But now you have a center. You have breath. You have awareness. You have the sacred pause. You can say, this is intense, but I do not have to lose myself. You can say, this is familiar, but I will not ignore my body. You can say, this feels deep, but depth must be matched by respect. You can say, this may be sacred, but sacred love still requires emotional responsibility. That is the quiet wisdom Solitude gave you. And perhaps the most beautiful part is this. When your energy becomes quiet, love no longer has to shout to get your attention. You start recognizing the subtle things. Consistency, gentleness, emotional safety, a steady tone, a calm presence, someone remembering small details, someone making room for your feelings without making you feel dramatic, someone whose silence does not feel like control, someone whose eyes do not just consume you, but meet you, someone who can sit with your depth without trying to turn it into something lighter. These things used to seem small. Now they feel sacred, because you understand what it cost you to get here. You had to lose the noise. You had to sit through the craving. You had to stop romanticizing the chase. You had to let your nervous system detox from almost love. You had to grieve the version of you who thought intensity was the same as intimacy. And now, slowly, you are becoming able to receive something different. Not just love that awakens you. Love that can also hold you. Not just love that mirrors your wounds. Love that invites your healing. Not just love that feels destined. Love that behaves with care. That is the distinction many people miss. A connection can feel spiritual and still require discernment. A person can feel familiar and still not be ready. A bond can be powerful and still need emotional maturity. A twin flame connection can be real and still not be healthy until both souls learn how to stop using love as a battlefield for unhealed pain. Your quiet energy allows you to see that. It allows you to stop forcing the connection into fantasy. It allows you to honor what you feel without becoming enslaved by it. It allows you to love with open eyes. Not closed ones. Not desperate ones. Open. Soft. Awake. Grounded. And maybe that is the real preparation. Not becoming so spiritual that nothing hurts you, but becoming so rooted in yourself that pain no longer makes you abandon your truth. So if you are in a season where everything feels quieter than before, do not assume nothing is happening. Something is happening. Inside you. In the spaces nobody sees. In the moments where you choose peace over panic. In the breaths you take instead of chasing. In the way you no longer respond to emotional crumbs like they are a feast. In the way your body is learning that love does not have to feel like a threat. This quietness is not emptiness. It is refinement. Your energy is being tuned. Your heart is becoming more honest. Your spirit is learning to recognize what is real, not by how loudly it arrives, but by how deeply it aligns. And when true love comes near, when your twin flame stands before you in whatever form, whatever timing, whatever chapter, you will not only ask, "Do I feel something?" You will ask, "Can I breathe here?" That question is sacred, because the love meant to walk with your soul should not require you to live in emotional suffocation. It may challenge you. It may awaken you. It may reveal you. But beneath all of that, somewhere deep in your body, there should be a place that exhales and whispers. This feels true. Not frantic. Not forced. Not like begging. True. And once you can recognize that, once your energy is quiet enough to feel the difference, you become ready for the next layer of the journey. Because twin flame love does not only bring peace, it also brings mirrors. And some mirrors are painfully honest. Lesson of this chapter: solitude teaches your spirit to stop romanticizing emotional chaos. It helps your nervous system learn the difference between love and survival, between intuition and fear, between soul recognition and old attachment wounds. Real love does not always arrive like fireworks. Sometimes it feels like your body finally exhaling. Your energy had to become quiet so you could recognize peace without mistaking it for boredom, safety without distrusting it, and depth without needing it to hurt. This is how you prepare for sacred love. Not by becoming numb, but by becoming clear. Chapter 4. Your twin flame could not arrive until you were strong enough to be mirrored. I used to think meeting your twin flame meant finally being loved without fear. I imagined it as this soft arrival. A person who would walk into my life and make everything make sense. Someone whose presence would calm the ache. Someone whose eyes would say, "I know you. I have always known you." Someone who would not make me question my worth, my timing, my sensitivity, or my ability to be loved. And maybe part of that is true. There are moments in a twin flame connection that feel impossible to explain. A look that lasts 1 second too long. A silence that says more than a conversation. A strange familiarity in their face. A feeling in your body, almost like your soul recognized them before your mind could catch up. You may not even understand why they affect you so deeply. They walk into the room, and something in you changes. Your breath catches a little. Your chest softens and tightens at the same time. Your body feels awake, alert, pulled, exposed. It is not always romantic at first. Sometimes it feels unsettling, like a memory you cannot place. Like standing in front of someone and feeling, quietly, "I know you from somewhere deeper than this life." And for a moment, it feels beautiful, sacred, almost impossible. Then something happens. They become distant, or they hesitate, or they look at you like they feel it too, then turn away. A message comes late. A reply feels colder than usual. They say something small, something ordinary, something that would not hurt if it came from anyone else. But from them, it lands somewhere ancient. Suddenly, you are not calm anymore. Your stomach drops. Your thoughts begin moving too quickly. Your heart starts looking for signs. Your body remembers every time someone you loved changed without warning. And you ask yourself, why does this person have so much power over me? Pause there, because that question is where the mirror begins. A twin flame does not simply walk into your life to give you comfort. They walk in carrying reflection. And reflection is not always gentle. Sometimes the mirror feels warm. Sometimes it feels like being seen for the first time. Sometimes it feels like someone has placed their hand on the hidden part of your heart and whispered, "I know this is here." But other times, the mirror feels like exposure. Like someone has accidentally touched a bruise you forgot you were protecting. You may think they are creating the pain, but often they are revealing pain that was already living inside you. That is one of the hardest truths of the twin flame journey. Your twin flame does not always wound you in the way you think. They reveal where the wound still has authority over your life. They reveal where abandonment still controls your reactions, where rejection still shapes your self-image, where silence still feels like punishment, where distance still feels like proof that you are not enough, where love still feels like something you must earn quickly before it disappears. And this is why your solitude had to come first. You had to become strong enough to stand in front of that mirror without shattering. Because before the solitude, maybe you would have confused every trigger with a command. If they pulled away, you chased. If they went quiet, you over-explained. If they seemed uncertain, you tried to become more lovable, more patient, more understanding, more spiritual, more available, less needy, less emotional, less honest. You adjusted yourself until you almost disappeared. And maybe you called it unconditional love. But deep down, some part of you knew. It was fear. Fear wearing devotion. Fear wearing loyalty. Fear wearing a beautiful spiritual name. There's raw honesty in admitting this. Sometimes we are not loving someone freely. Sometimes we are trying to prevent them from abandoning us. That sentence hurts. Not because it is cruel, because it is true in places we do not like to look at. You can love someone deeply and still be attached to what their presence proves about you. You can feel a sacred bond and still react from old fear. You can believe in the connection and still use the connection to avoid your own emptiness. Both can exist. That is what makes this journey so emotionally complicated. It is not black and white. It is not simply, they are my twin flame, so everything is divine. And it is not simply, they triggered me so none of it was real. The twin flame path lives in the tension. The connection can be real and still require healing. The love can be sacred and still be immature. The recognition can be undeniable and still not be ready for union. The mirror can awaken you and still hurt. This is where many chosen ones lose themselves. Not because they are weak, because they feel deeply. They sense the spiritual layer. They feel the invisible thread. They notice the timing, the signs, the dreams, the strange emotional pull. They remember the eye contact. They replay the conversation. They know something about this person is different. But then the pain begins. The running. The silence. The confusion. The push and pull. The emotional contradictions. And suddenly, the chosen one starts asking the wrong question. How do I get them to come back? But the deeper question is, what is this mirror trying to show me about myself? Not to excuse their behavior. Not to spiritualize disrespect. Not to pretend inconsistency does not hurt. But to reclaim your power. Because if every emotional shift in them controls your entire inner world, the mirror is showing you something. If their silence makes you feel worthless, the mirror is showing you something. If their distance makes you abandon your peace, the mirror is showing you something. If their uncertainty makes you work harder to prove your value, the mirror is showing you something. Not about your lack of worth. About the wound that still believes worth must be proven. And this is where sacred solitude built something inside you. It built the pause. The breath before reaction. The space between trigger and response. Before, when you felt the fear, you may have immediately moved. Sent the text. Checked their profile. Looked for hidden meaning. Asked a friend to interpret their behavior. Pulled tarot cards. Searched for signs. Tried to feel their energy. Tried to make the uncertainty less unbearable. But after solitude, something in you can pause. Not always perfectly. You are human. There may still be days when your hands shake a little. Days when you want to know. Days when silence feels too loud. Days when you feel foolish for caring. But now there is another voice inside you. Quieter. Steadier. It says, wait. Breathe. Do not abandon yourself just because fear has entered the room. That voice is sacred. That voice was born in solitude. That voice is the part of you strong enough to be mirrored without collapsing into the reflection. Imagine this. You meet someone who feels like home. Not a casual home. Not a comfortable distraction. A strange, deep, soul-level home. Their eyes meet yours and something unspoken passes between you. Not dramatic. Just undeniable. A tiny stillness opens in the room. For a second, the world feels quieter. And maybe they feel it too. You can see it. The slight pause. The softness in their face. The way they look away just a little too quickly. The way their energy comes close, then retreats. And there it is. The mirror. Their closeness awakens your longing. Their retreat awakens your fear. Their recognition awakens your hope. Their uncertainty awakens your wound. What do you do with that? Before healing, you might have made their fear your responsibility. You might have thought, if I love them better, they will stop running. You might have thought, if I am patient enough, they will choose me. You might have thought, if I can just explain the connection, they will understand. But the mirror asks for something more mature. It asks, can you let someone have their process without turning their unreadiness into proof that you are unworthy? Can you feel the connection without trying to control the timing? Can you honor what is sacred without tolerating what is harmful? Can you see their fear without abandoning your own needs? Can you love them and still let them face themselves? That last one is difficult, especially for chosen ones, because chosen ones often have a deep instinct to understand, to hold space, to see the wounded child underneath someone's behavior, to sense the fear behind their silence, to feel compassion even when they are hurting. And compassion is beautiful. But without boundaries, compassion becomes self-erasure. You start saying things like, they are just scared. They have been through a lot. They feel it, but they do not know how to handle it. Their soul knows, even if their human self is running. Maybe all of that is true. But your pain is true too. Your needs are true too. Your nervous system is true too. Your dignity is true too. Spiritual understanding should not require emotional starvation. Read that slowly. Spiritual understanding should not require emotional starvation. You can understand someone and still not let their confusion become your home. You can feel their soul and still respond to their behavior. You can love the mirror and still step back when the reflection becomes too sharp. That is strength. That is what your solitude prepared you for. Not to become cold. Not to deny the connection. Not to punish them with silence. But to stop using love as an excuse to leave yourself. There is an uncomfortable moment in the twin flame journey when you realize union is not just about whether they return. It is about whether you can remain whole when they do. Because what happens if they come back and you are still the same? Still anxious. Still waiting to be chosen. Still afraid to speak your needs. Still interpreting every shift as danger. Still willing to shrink to keep the connection alive. Then reunion becomes another cycle. Another high. Another heartbreak. Another lesson wearing the face of destiny. So life, in its strange mercy, may delay the arrival. Or delay the reunion. Or stretch the silence. Not to punish you. To strengthen the one who would be standing there when the mirror returns. There is a difference between wanting your twin flame and being ready to meet them. Wanting can come from longing. Readiness comes from grounding. Wanting says, come back so I can feel whole. Readiness says, if you come back, meet me in truth. Wanting says, choose me so I can stop hurting. Readiness says, I choose myself even while my heart remains open. Wanting says, I cannot breathe without you. Readiness says, I can breathe. And from that place, I can love you clearly. That shift matters. It changes the entire energy of the connection. Because twin flame love at its highest is not meant to make you dependent. It is meant to make you conscious. Conscious of your wounds, your patterns, your gifts, your avoidance, your longing, your fear of intimacy, your fear of abandonment, your need for control, your habit of turning love into proof, your tendency to chase what feels familiar instead of what feels safe. The mirror shows everything, not just the beautiful parts, not just the spiritual parts, not just the parts you want to post about. It shows the jealousy you do not want to admit, the resentment under your patience, the fear behind your detachment, the hope hidden under your surrender, the anger underneath your compassion, the exhaustion beneath your loyalty. And it asks you to become honest. Quietly honest. Privately honest. The kind of honesty that happens when you are alone and can no longer perform enlightenment. You may have said, I've surrendered. But then you still checked if they were online. You may have said, I'm detached. but one dream pulled you back into longing for 3 days. You may have said, "I only want what is meant for me." But secretly, you wanted the universe to prove it was them. There is no shame in that. It is human. It is tender. It is the messy middle of healing. The point is not to judge yourself for having contradictions. The point is to see them. Because what you can see, you can heal. What you can name, you can hold. What you can admit, you no longer have to act out unconsciously. This is why your twin flame could not arrive before you had some strength. Not perfect strength. Not the kind where nothing affects you. A real strength. The strength to feel something deeply without turning it into desperation. The strength to love someone without making them responsible for your entire sense of worth. The strength to miss them without chasing them. The strength to be triggered and still ask, "What is mine to heal here?" The strength to say, "This connection is sacred, but so is my peace." That sentence carries maturity. And maybe it took every lonely night to become the person who could say it. Maybe it took every unanswered message. Every moment when you had to sit on your hands instead of reaching out. Every night when your chest ached and nobody knew. Every morning when you woke up and chose yourself again, even with a heart that still felt bruised. Those moments were not wasted. They were strengthening your inner witness. The part of you that can watch the emotion without being swallowed by it. The part of you that can say, "I am feeling abandonment, but I am not abandoned. I am feeling fear, but I am not in danger. I am feeling longing, but I do not have to chase. I am feeling love, but I do not have to disappear." This is the kind of strength that makes true union possible. Not fantasy union. Not obsession dressed as fate. Not two wounded people using each other as emotional oxygen. Real union. The kind where two souls can stand before each other without making love a battlefield. The kind where the mirror does not become a weapon. The kind where both people are willing to see themselves. Because that is the other side of this. Your twin flame has their mirror too. You are not the only one being revealed. Your presence may awaken things in them they do not know how to face. Maybe your depth exposes their emotional avoidance. Maybe your honesty makes their masks uncomfortable. Maybe your sensitivity shows them where they have been numb. Maybe your love reminds them of everything they want, but do not feel ready to receive. Maybe your eyes make them feel seen in a way they cannot control. So they run, or they pull back, or they act casual, or they bury themselves in distractions, or they choose what feels easier because what feels sacred also feels exposing. This does not mean you wait forever in pain. It means you understand without losing yourself. A mirror can explain behavior. It does not excuse harm. A soul bond can create compassion. It does not cancel boundaries. A sacred connection can be real. It still has to become emotionally safe. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let the mirror work on both sides without forcing the outcome. Let them face what your presence awakens. Let yourself face what their distance awakens. Let the connection breathe. Let silence reveal. Let time mature what intensity could only ignite. That is not passive. That is powerful. It takes strength to stop interfering with someone else's awakening. Especially when your heart wants certainty. Especially when your soul feels the bond. Especially when some nights you can almost feel them thinking of you. But spiritual maturity says, "I will not chase your soul while your actions avoid mine." Quiet. Clear. Strong. That is the kind of sentence born from sacred solitude. And when you reach that place, the mirror changes. It no longer only hurts you. It teaches you. You start seeing your triggers as information. Not identity. Not shame. Information. When jealousy rises, you ask, "Where do I feel replaceable?" When fear rises, you ask, "What part of me still expects love to leave?" When obsession rises, you ask, "What am I avoiding in my own life by focusing on them?" When longing rises, you ask, "What need am I asking this person to meet that I have abandoned within myself?" When anger rises, you ask, "Where did I stay silent too long?" These questions are not easy. They require courage. But they return your power to you. And suddenly, your twin flame is no longer just someone you miss. They become a mirror that helps you come home. Not because they complete you, because they reveal where you were still living outside yourself. That is the deeper purpose. And maybe this is why the connection felt so overwhelming before. You were not just meeting another person. You were meeting your own hidden world. Your unhealed places. Your unmet needs. Your capacity to love. Your fear of being seen. Your hunger for union. Your resistance to surrender. Your deepest desire to be known. That is a lot for one heart to hold. So the solitude trained you. It made you sit with yourself. It made you face silence. It made you practice not running. It made you learn how to breathe through emotional storms. It made you strong enough to ask, what is this showing me? Instead of only asking, why are they doing this to me? That shift is everything. It is the difference between being consumed by the mirror and being transformed by it. And no, it does not mean you never cry. You might. You probably will. There will be nights when you still miss the softness of their voice. The strange way they understood one part of you without explanation. The memory of their eyes. The almost moments. The conversations that felt unfinished. The version of the connection that existed more in potential than reality. You are allowed to grieve that. You are allowed to admit it mattered. You are allowed to feel the ache without turning it into a command to return to what hurt you. That is strength too. Soft strength. The kind that does not deny love. The kind that does not dramatize pain. The kind that says, I can hold both. I can love and still choose truth. I can miss and still move forward. I can feel the mirror and still remain myself. Chosen one, your twin flame could not arrive until you were strong enough to be mirrored, because this connection was never meant to keep you unconscious. It was not meant to flatter the version of you that wants romance without revelation. It was not meant to soothe the wound while leaving the wound in control. It was not meant to give you a fairy tale while your soul was still fragmented. It came, or will come, to awaken truth. The truth about how deeply you love. The truth about how much you have survived. The truth about where you still hide. The truth about what you still fear. The truth about what you are finally ready to stop repeating. And if the mirror feels painful, breathe. Do not immediately run. Do not immediately chase. Do not immediately blame yourself. Place your hand on your chest and ask softly, what is being revealed? Not as a punishment, as a doorway. Because every trigger that becomes conscious loses some of its control over you. Every wound you can meet with compassion becomes less likely to choose your next relationship for you. Every mirror you can face without abandoning yourself brings you closer to the kind of love that does not need fantasy to survive. This is sacred preparation. Not glamorous. Not easy. But sacred. And when you understand this, you begin to see why life had to strengthen you before union. Your twin flame does not just meet your light. They meet your shadow. Your fear. Your longing. Your tenderness. Your guardedness. Your beauty. Your contradictions. Your unspoken grief. And you meet theirs too. For that kind of meeting, you need more than attraction. You need emotional capacity. You need honesty. You need grounding. You need the courage to see and be seen. That is what your solitude was building. A soul that can stand before the mirror and not mistake every reflection for rejection. A heart that can feel exposed and still remain open. A body that can be activated and still return to breath. A spirit that can say, I am willing to see what love reveals, but I will not abandon myself in the seeing. That is the beginning of true readiness. And still, there is another layer. Because before your twin flame could meet you fully, life had to remove one more thing. Not just people. Not just distractions. Not just emotional noise. It had to remove the version of love you were taught to settle for. The almost love. The half love. The connection that gave just enough to keep you hoping, but never enough to let you rest. And that is where the next chapter begins. Lesson of this chapter. Your twin flame does not only bring comfort. They bring reflection. Their presence may awaken love, longing, recognition, fear, tenderness, and wounds you thought were already healed. That does not mean the connection is false. It means the mirror is working. But a sacred mirror requires strength. Your solitude taught you how to pause before reacting, breathe before chasing, and ask what the trigger is revealing instead of letting it control you. The emotional truth is simple. A twin flame does not create your wound. They reveal where the wound still has power. And your healing begins when you can stand before that mirror without abandoning yourself. Chapter 5. Solitude broke your attachment to almost love. There is a kind of love that almost feels right. Almost safe. Almost deep. Almost honest. Almost mutual. Almost enough. And if you have been emotionally hungry for a long time, almost can start to feel like a feast. A message once every few days. A soft word after a week of distance. A look that seems to say everything their mouth refuses to admit. A small sign that keeps you holding on. A memory so warm that it makes you forget how cold the present has become. Almost love is painful because it does not completely abandon you. It gives you fragments. Just enough to keep the door open. Just enough to keep your hope alive. Just enough to make you question whether you are being patient or slowly betraying yourself. And maybe you know that place. Maybe you have loved someone who never fully chose you, but never fully let you go either. They came close, then disappeared. They opened up, then shut down. They looked at you like they felt something real, then acted like nothing happened. And there you were, trying to make sense of the contradiction, trying to hold the beautiful moments in one hand and the painful patterns in the other. Trying to convince yourself that the depth you felt must mean something. Trying to believe that if you stayed loving, stayed patient, stayed understanding, stayed spiritually mature, one day, they would finally meet you where your heart had been waiting all along. But chosen one, there comes a point when almost love begins to cost too much. Not all at once. Slowly. It costs your peace, your confidence, your sleep, your softness, your ability to trust what is consistent, your ability to tell the difference between a soul connection and emotional starvation. And this is one of the reasons solitude had to come. Not to make you lonely forever. To break your attachment to the kind of love that only gave you enough to survive, but never enough to feel safe. Because before sacred love can enter your life fully, you have to stop making a home out of emotional crumbs. Pause there, because that may touch something tender. Maybe you were not asking for too much. Maybe you were only asking the wrong person. Maybe the love you kept trying to earn was never unavailable because you were unworthy. Maybe it was unavailable because that person did not have the emotional capacity to meet you. And yet, you kept translating their absence into something about you. You thought, maybe I'm too intense. Maybe I scared them away. Maybe I should be more detached. Maybe I should stop needing clarity. Maybe if I heal more, they will come closer. But what if your need for clarity was not the problem? What if your need for honesty was not too much? What if your desire for consistency was not attachment? What if the part of you asking for mutual effort was not unhealed, but awake? This is where almost love becomes dangerous. It teaches you to question healthy needs. It makes you feel dramatic for wanting emotional safety. It makes you feel needy for wanting communication. It makes you feel spiritually immature for being hurt by inconsistency. So you start shrinking. Quietly. You stop asking certain questions. You pretend you are okay with less than you need. You tell yourself, I understand their wounds. You say, they are just scared. You say, they feel it too, they just don't know how to express it. And maybe that is true. Maybe they are scared. Maybe they do feel it. Maybe the connection is real. Maybe their soul recognizes yours in ways their human self cannot carry yet. But your heart is still living on fragments. And fragments are not nourishment. They are reminders of what could be whole, but is not. Raw honesty? Sometimes we use spiritual understanding to excuse emotional neglect. We tell ourselves we are being patient, when we are actually afraid to walk away. We tell ourselves we are honoring divine timing, when we are actually waiting for someone to stop hurting us. We tell ourselves this is unconditional love, when deep down, we are hoping our loyalty will finally convince them to choose us. That sentence is hard to hear. It was hard for me too. There were moments when I did not want to admit that I was waiting for proof. I called it faith. I called it surrender. I called it trusting the journey. But underneath all that beautiful language, there was a small wounded part of me whispering, "Please come back and show me I mattered." That is not something to shame. It is something to hold gently. Because the part of you that clings to almost love is not stupid. It is not weak. It is not spiritually failing. It is usually the part of you that once learned love was unpredictable. The part that learned closeness could disappear without warning. The part that learned affection had to be earned. The part that learned to survive on small signs instead of steady presence. So when someone gives you just enough attention to keep hoping, that younger part wakes up. It thinks, this time I can make love stay. This time I can be patient enough. This time I can understand enough. This time I can love without asking for too much. This time I can finally be chosen. And suddenly, you are not only loving the person in front of you. You are trying to repair every old wound through them. You are trying to get the ending you never got. You are trying to turn inconsistency into redemption. But almost love cannot heal the wound that it keeps reopening. It can only keep you attached to the hope of healing. That is why solitude becomes sacred. Solitude pulls you away from the constant cycle of almost. No more waiting for the message. No more reading between lines that were never clear. No more surviving on emotional leftovers. No more turning one beautiful moment into a reason to ignore 10 painful ones. No more using potential as proof. No more loving someone's soul while starving beside their behavior. In solitude, you finally begin to feel the cost. At first, that cost feels like grief. You miss them. You miss the almost. You miss the moments that felt real. The late conversations. The way they looked at you. The strange timing. The feeling that something invisible was moving between you. You miss the version of them that appeared in flashes. Soft. Open. Present. Vulnerable. The version that made you think, there you are. That's the real you. And maybe it was. Maybe you really did glimpse something true. But a glimpse is not a relationship. A moment is not consistency. Potential is not presence. A soul connection is not emotional responsibility. Let that land. A soul connection is not emotional responsibility. Someone can feel deeply and still not show up. Someone can recognize you and still run from themselves. Someone can love you in a hidden place and still hurt you in real life. Someone can be your mirror and still not be your safe place yet. That distinction is painful, but it gives you back your power. Because when you stop confusing potential with love, you stop abandoning yourself for possibilities. You stop living inside what could be. You start looking at what is. What is present? What is consistent? What is honest? What is mutual? What is nourishing? What is actually happening when the fantasy gets quiet? These questions can feel brutal. They cut through the emotional fog. But they also save you. Almost love survives in ambiguity. It survives in your ability to explain everything away. It survives in the gap between what they do and what you hope it means. It survives when you keep saying, "But I know they care," while your body is exhausted from not feeling cared for. Solitude breaks that spell. Slowly, painfully, mercifully. It gives your nervous system enough distance to realize how often you were living in emotional anticipation. Waiting. Always waiting. Waiting for them to reply. Waiting for them to open up. Waiting for them to be ready. Waiting for them to admit what you felt. Waiting for them to stop running. Waiting for them to become the person they were in the moments that made you stay. And then one day, in the silence, you ask yourself a question you may have avoided for a long time. How long have I been waiting to be loved properly by someone who only loves me in fragments? That question changes something. It does not always make the love disappear. No. Sometimes you still love them. Sometimes you still feel the bond. Sometimes you still remember. Sometimes your chest still softens when their name appears in your mind. But the attachment begins to loosen. Not because you stopped caring. Because you started seeing. And seeing clearly is the beginning of freedom. You begin to notice how almost love trained your body. The way your stomach tightened when they went quiet. The way your mood lifted when they returned. The way one message could make the whole day brighter. The way one silence could make you feel invisible. The way your nervous system became dependent on their inconsistency. High, drop, hope, fear, relief, ache, connection, withdrawal, again, and again, and again. It starts to feel less like love and more like a cycle. A cycle your body recognized before your mind was ready to name it. Solitude lets the cycle slow down. It gives you time to detox from emotional unpredictability. And detox is not always peaceful. Sometimes you crave the very thing that was hurting you. You want to reach out. You want the familiar high. You want one more sign. One more conversation. One more moment that proves you were not crazy for feeling what you felt. Your hand reaches for the phone. You open the chat. You read the last message. You type something simple. Hey, I hope you're okay. Then you stop. The room is quiet. Your heart is loud. Your thumb hovers. And something inside you whispers. Are you reaching out from love or from withdrawal? That question is sacred. It may save you from returning to a cycle your soul is trying to outgrow. Sometimes not sending the message is not pride. It is healing. Sometimes silence is not manipulation. It is self-respect. Sometimes stepping back is not giving up on love. It is refusing to keep feeding a connection that only survives when you abandon your own needs. And yes, it hurts. It can feel like grieving someone who is still alive. Grieving what almost happened. Grieving the future you imagined. Grieving the conversations you thought you would one day have. Grieving the version of them you believed was hidden underneath their fear. Grieving your own hope. That may be the hardest part. Not losing them. Losing the hope that kept you emotionally attached. Hope can be beautiful. Hope can also become a cage when it keeps you loyal to what keeps hurting you. There is an emotional contradiction here. You can still believe in divine timing and still stop waiting in pain. You can still honor a twin flame bond and still refuse emotional crumbs. You can still love someone's soul and still choose distance from their unhealed patterns. You can still feel connected and still say, this version of the connection is not healthy for me. That is not betrayal. That is maturity. A lot of people think unconditional love means unconditional access. It does not. You can love someone unconditionally and still have conditions for access to your life. Respect, honesty, consistency, accountability, emotional safety. These are not demands from an unhealed ego. They are the basic structure that allows love to become livable. Without them, love becomes a wound you keep romanticizing. Chosen one, your solitude came to teach you that your heart is not a waiting room for someone else's readiness. Your life is not a holding space for another person's avoidance. Your softness is not an endless resource for people who only arrive when they need warmth. Your depth is not meant to be consumed by someone who refuses to meet their own. And your love is not less sacred because it now has boundaries. In fact, boundaries may be the first sign that your love has become sacred in a mature way. Not possessive, not desperate, not self-erasing. Mature. You begin to love with your eyes open. You stop saying yes to every return. You stop melting every time they give you the smallest sign. You stop treating inconsistency as mystery. You stop calling emotional unavailability depth. You stop confusing silence with spiritual testing, when sometimes it is simply a lack of capacity. And that clarity may feel cold at first, especially if you are used to over-understanding. You may worry, am I becoming hardened? No, you are becoming honest. There is a tenderness that has no boundaries, and it becomes exhaustion. There is a tenderness with boundaries, and it becomes wisdom. That is what solitude was forming in you. Wisdom, not bitterness, not resentment, not revenge. Wisdom, the kind that can look at almost love and say, I see why I wanted this. I see what it awakened in me. I see the beauty. I see the pain. I see the pattern. And I see that I cannot keep abandoning myself for a love that only meets me halfway. That is not closing your heart. That is clearing it. Clearing it from emotional negotiations. Clearing it from old hunger. Clearing it from the need to turn unavailable love into destiny. Clearing it from the belief that the more you suffer, the more meaningful the connection must be. Pain does not prove love. Suffering does not prove sacredness. Waiting forever does not prove loyalty. Sometimes the most sacred thing you can do is stop participating in your own emotional starvation. Softly, without hatred, without drama, without needing them to be the villain. You can release almost love without demonizing the person. Maybe they did the best they could from where they were. Maybe they cared in the only way they knew how. Maybe they were overwhelmed by the connection too. Maybe they will grow one day. Maybe they will not. But your healing cannot depend on their timeline. Your peace cannot wait for their awakening. Your worth cannot hang from their uncertainty. Your life has to return to you. And that is what solitude does. It brings your life back into your own hands. At first, those hands feel empty. No one to chase. No one to decode. No one to hope around. No one to emotionally orbit. Just you. Your mornings. Your breath. Your small routines. Your quiet room. Your unanswered questions. Your heart learning how to beat without waiting for someone else to confirm it still matters. And slowly, you begin to fill your life with yourself again. Not as a performance. Not to prove you have moved on. Gently. You make coffee without checking your phone first. You go for a walk and notice the air. You clean your space. You listen to music that does not reopen the wound. You laugh unexpectedly. You sleep a little better. You start making plans that do not revolve around whether they might return. You feel lonely sometimes, yes. But it is cleaner now. Less frantic. Less humiliating. Less tied to someone else's absence. You begin to realize, I can miss them and still be okay. That sentence is a milestone. Quiet but massive. I can miss them and still be okay. I can love them and still choose myself. I can honor what happened and still stop living there. I can feel the bond and still refuse the cycle. This is how attachment breaks. Not always through one dramatic goodbye. Sometimes through 1,000 small returns to yourself. Every time you choose not to chase a crumb. Every time you stop explaining away pain. Every time you let someone's inconsistency be information instead of a challenge to win. Every time you say, I deserve more than potential. Every time you choose peace over the emotional high. Every time you stop asking almost love to become whole love. You become freer. And freedom can feel strange when you have been attached for a long time. You may even feel guilty. Like you are betraying the connection by no longer suffering for it. But suffering is not the measure of love. Peace is not proof that you stopped caring. Sometimes peace is proof that the love has finally matured beyond attachment. You no longer need to bleed to prove it was real. You no longer need to wait in pain to prove your loyalty. You no longer need to keep the wound open so the bond feels alive. You can let love become quiet. You can let it become prayer. You can let it become memory. You can let it become wisdom. You can let it become space. And in that space, something powerful happens. Your standards rise naturally. Not in a harsh way. In a healed way. You stop being impressed by words without embodiment. You stop being seduced by intensity without responsibility. You stop being moved by apologies without change. You stop being available to people who only value your absence after they have taken your presence for granted. You stop mistaking someone's fear of losing you for their capacity to love you. That last one matters. Some people do not want to lose you, but they still do not know how to love you. They miss your energy. They miss your comfort. They miss knowing you were there. They miss the safety of your devotion. But missing you is not the same as meeting you. Regret is not the same as readiness. A return is not the same as transformation. This is where your solitude gives you discernment. If someone comes back, you do not only listen to the words. You observe the energy, the consistency, the accountability, the way your body feels around them. Do you feel safe? Do you feel clear? Do you feel respected? Can your nervous system rest? Can truth be spoken without punishment? Can both people take responsibility? Is there growth or just longing? These questions protect the sacredness of the connection. They do not destroy it. A real twin flame bond does not need you to lower your worth to keep it alive. It does not need you to accept confusion as proof of depth. It does not need you to live on crumbs while calling it divine. If the connection is meant to mature, it must mature into something that can hold your humanity, your needs, your tenderness, your boundaries, your healing, your peace. And if it cannot, then solitude will keep protecting you until you stop confusing the ache of attachment with the call of love. That protection may feel lonely, but it is not cruel. It is sacred. It is the universe saying, no more half-love, no more emotional leftovers, no more proving, no more shrinking, no more calling inconsistency sacred just because it feels familiar. No more begging closed hands to hold your open heart. You were not created to be loved in fragments. You were not created to survive on almost. You were not created to keep pouring yourself into people who only become thirsty when you are gone. Your heart was made for mutuality. A love that breathes both ways. A love that does not require you to decode basic care. A love where presence is not a rare event. A love where the soul connection is matched by human responsibility. A love that can look you in the eyes and not run from what it awakens. And maybe that love is with your twin flame after both of you have grown. Maybe it comes as reunion. Maybe it comes as a higher version of the bond. Maybe it comes after silence has taught both souls what they once could not hold. But whatever form it takes, your solitude was preparing you to stop accepting less than truth. It was breaking your attachment to almost love so that when real love comes near, you do not push it away because it feels unfamiliar. So you do not mistake calm for lack of passion. So you do not sabotage consistency because you are used to chasing. So you do not crave the wound more than the healing. So you do not choose the person who triggers your hunger over the person who honors your heart. This is sacred preparation. It may have looked like loneliness. It may have felt like loss. But underneath it, you were being trained to recognize wholeness. To recognize love that does not arrive in pieces. To recognize when your soul is being met, not just activated. To recognize when someone's presence nourishes you instead of keeping you in emotional suspense. And maybe right now you're still in the middle of letting go. Maybe part of you still hopes they will change. Maybe part of you still checks. Maybe part of you still remembers the almost and wonders if it could become whole. Be gentle with yourself. Attachment does not break just because the mind understands. The body needs time. The heart needs repetition. The nervous system needs proof that peace is safe. So take it moment by moment. One breath. One choice. One seul message. One boundary. One honest question. One refusal to turn a crumb into a meal. One day where you choose not to orbit someone who cannot meet you. That is how you come back. That is how the spell breaks. That is how almost love loses its power. And when it does, you may notice something surprising. The silence no longer feels like punishment. It begins to feel like protection. The empty space no longer feels like proof that nobody wants you. It begins to feel like a sacred room being preserved for what is real. You stop fearing the absence of almost love because you finally understand the cost of keeping it. And deep inside, a new truth begins to rise. I would rather be alone in my peace than chosen in fragments. That is not bitterness. That is healing. That is dignity. That is the soul remembering its own value. Chosen one, solitude broke your attachment to almost love because your heart was being prepared for something whole. Something honest. Something capable. Something that does not require you to starve while calling it sacred. And before that love can fully arrive, you must be willing to release the half-love that trained you to expect so little. You must let the almost dissolve. Let the fantasy breathe out. Let the old hunger soften. Let the space remain open. Because what is truly meant for you will not need you to shrink your soul to fit inside someone else's limitations. It will not ask you to survive on fragments. It will not make you beg for clarity. It will not make you feel ashamed for wanting to be met. And once you understand that, the silence changes. It becomes less like a wound, more like a doorway into protection, a doorway into dignity, a doorway into the next layer of your becoming. Because once you stop accepting almost love, life begins to show you what the silence was really doing. It was not just making space. It was guarding your heart from repeating the same cycle again. And that is where the next chapter begins. Lesson of this chapter: solitude teaches you that almost love is not the same as sacred love. A message here and there, a beautiful moment, a deep look, a strong energetic pull, or someone's hidden feelings are not enough to build emotional safety. You can honor a connection and still refuse to survive on fragments. You can love someone's soul and still respond honestly to their behavior. The emotional truth is simple. Your heart is not a waiting room for someone else's readiness. Solitude broke your attachment to almost love so you could stop mistaking crumbs for connection, potential for presence, and longing for destiny. You were not being emptied to suffer. You were being cleared for something whole. Chapter 6. The silence was protecting your heart from repeating the same cycle. I did not understand protection when it first arrived. I thought protection would feel warm, clear, comforting, like a door opening at the right time, like someone choosing me without hesitation, like life finally giving me a sign that all the pain had meant something. But protection did not come dressed like comfort. It came dressed like silence. It came through unanswered messages, through plans that never happened, through people becoming distant without explaining why, through sudden endings that left me standing there with all this love in my hands and nowhere to place it. And for a while, I thought life was being cruel. I thought the silence meant I had been forgotten. I thought the distance meant I had been rejected. I thought the closed doors meant I had failed some invisible test. Maybe you know that feeling. Maybe there was someone you tried to hold on to, someone your heart kept circling back to, even when your mind knew you were tired. You told yourself, just one more conversation, one more message, one more chance, one more sign, one more moment where they might finally say what your soul had been waiting to hear. So you reached, or you almost reached. You opened the chat, typed the words, deleted them, typed them again, stared at the screen like it could give you mercy. And then something in your body hesitated. A tightness in your stomach, a heaviness behind your ribs, a quiet inner stop. Not loud, not dramatic, just a feeling that said, don't go back just because it feels familiar. That moment may not have felt spiritual. It may have felt lonely. It may have felt unfair. It may have felt like you were being forced to be strong when you only wanted to be held. But chosen one, sometimes the silence is not the absence of guidance. Sometimes the silence is the guidance. Sometimes the door that will not open is not punishing you. It is protecting you from walking back into a room where you had already lost yourself once. Pause there, because this is hard, especially when your heart still remembers the beautiful parts. The laugh, the softness, the eye contact, the way they once said your name, the moments where everything felt possible, the version of them that made you believe, maybe this is different. And maybe it was different. Maybe the connection was real. Maybe the pull was not imagined. Maybe the soul recognition was there. But real does not always mean ready. Sacred does not always mean safe. Familiar does not always mean aligned. And love, without the maturity to hold it, can become a cycle that keeps reopening the same wound. That is what the silence was protecting you from. Not love itself. The cycle. The returning. The hoping. The collapsing. The forgiving before anything changed. The waiting for someone to become consistent while your own nervous system lived in survival. The way one small sign could erase weeks of pain. The way one warm message could make you forget every cold silence. The way you kept accepting emotional fragments because the bond felt too meaningful to release. The silence came to interrupt that. Not gently maybe, but mercifully. Because sometimes life has to become quiet enough for you to hear what your attachment has been talking over. And attachment can be loud. It can sound like intuition. It can sound like faith. It can sound like loyalty. It can sound like, I just know there is more between us. And maybe there is. But there is also your peace. There is also your body. There is also the version of you who gets anxious every time they disappear. There is also the version of you who stops sleeping well, stops eating normally, stops feeling grounded, stops living fully, stops being present with yourself because part of you is always waiting for them to return. That is not sacred union. That is emotional captivity. Raw honesty? Some cycles do not keep going because the other person is powerful. They keep going because the wound is familiar. You know the pattern. You know the ache. You know what it feels like to wait. You know what it feels like to hope. You know what it feels like to be almost chosen. And the nervous system can mistake familiarity for safety, even when familiarity is breaking your heart. So when the silence came, it may have felt like loss. But underneath it, something deeper was happening. Life was removing the emotional trigger from your hands. It was creating distance between you and the pattern. It was saying, you cannot heal inside the same cycle that keeps teaching your body to panic. Because how can your nervous system learn peace if it keeps returning to the same uncertainty? How can your heart learn dignity if it keeps accepting the same inconsistency? How can your soul prepare for sacred love if it keeps making excuses for love that does not know how to be responsible? There comes a point where protection does not ask your permission. It simply closes the door. And that is why it hurts. You did not always feel ready to let go. You may have still wanted closure. Still wanted an explanation. Still wanted one honest conversation where they would finally admit what you had both been feeling. You wanted the ending to make sense. You wanted the silence to have a reason. You wanted them to understand what their distance did to you. You wanted them to say, I know I hurt you. I was scared. I did not know how to handle what I felt. And maybe they will one day. Maybe they will not. But your healing cannot keep waiting at the edge of someone else's self-awareness. Your peace cannot depend on whether they become brave enough to speak. Your future cannot remain paused until someone from the past learns how to name what they felt. The silence was protecting your life from being held hostage by unfinished conversations. Let that land. Some conversations stay unfinished not because your soul failed, but because your soul is being taught to stop needing every wound to explain itself before you are allowed to move forward. Sometimes closure is not a conversation. Sometimes closure is your body finally realizing, I cannot keep returning to what makes me disappear. Sometimes closure is the peace that comes after you stop begging the past to become honest. Sometimes closure is not hearing from them. Sometimes closure is the silence showing you exactly what their words kept avoiding. And maybe that is painful, but it is also clean, because confusion can keep you attached longer than love can. When someone gives you just enough uncertainty, your mind keeps working, trying to solve them, trying to decode them, trying to find the hidden reason, trying to make the pain meaningful. But silence, when you stop fighting it, begins to reveal the pattern. You see what you could not see while you were emotionally inside it. You see how often you were the one repairing the bridge. You see how often your compassion became a place for someone else to hide from accountability. You see how often you called yourself patient when you were actually afraid of being alone. You see how often you let the spiritual connection distract you from the human behavior. And this is where protection begins to feel different. Not pleasant, but clear. You begin to understand why certain doors would not open, why certain messages never came, why certain plans fell apart, why every attempt to return felt heavier than before. Life was not blocking your happiness. It was blocking your regression. There is a difference. Regression is when you go back to a place that feels familiar, but your soul has already outgrown it. Regression is texting someone who only gives you temporary relief. Regression is mistaking their return for growth. Regression is accepting the same behavior because you missed the potential. Regression is choosing the emotional high over the deeper truth your body has been trying to tell you. And if you are chosen, your spirit will not let you stay comfortable in regression for long. Not anymore. The old pattern starts to feel painful faster. The old conversations feel emptier. The old excuses stop working. The old version of you who could wait endlessly begins to feel tired. Not bitter. Tired. A sacred kind of tired. The kind that says, I cannot keep doing this to myself. Have you ever felt that? Not anger exactly. Not hatred. Just this deep exhaustion in your soul. Like you have finally reached the end of your ability to betray yourself politely. You do not want revenge. You do not even want drama. You just want peace. You want your mornings back. You want your mind back. You want to stop feeling their energy in every quiet moment. You want to stop turning every silence into a question about your worth. You want to love without becoming emotionally homeless. That exhaustion is not failure. It is awakening. It is the part of you that used to survive on chaos finally saying, enough. And when that part speaks, listen. It may be the most honest voice in you. The silence was protecting that voice. It was giving it room to rise. Because when you are constantly inside the cycle, you cannot hear yourself clearly. There is always another message. Another emotional shift. Another hope. Another disappointment. Another reason to keep waiting. Another spiritual sign that makes you question whether stepping away means you are giving up too soon. But in silence, the noise starts to settle. You begin to feel what you actually feel. Not what you wish you felt. Not what the fantasy tells you to feel. Not what the connection once promised. What is real now? And sometimes what is real is grief. Sometimes what is real is love. Sometimes what is real is anger you were afraid to admit. Sometimes what is real is relief. That one can feel confusing. Relief. You may miss them and still feel relieved that the cycle has paused. You may love them and still feel calmer when you are not waiting for their next emotional shift. You may grieve the connection and still notice that your body breathes more easily without the constant uncertainty. That contradiction does not mean your love was fake. It means your body is telling the truth. Your soul can love someone while your nervous system recognizes that the current pattern was hurting you. Both can be true. And this is where many people feel guilty. They think, if I feel relief, did I not love them enough? No. Relief often means your system is finally experiencing what it feels like to stop bracing, to stop scanning, to stop waiting, to stop preparing for disappointment. A love that keeps you in survival will make peace feel like withdrawal at first. Then slowly, peace begins to feel like home. This is why protection can be misunderstood. At first, it feels like being denied what you want. Later, it feels like being returned to what you need. You wanted the message. You needed your dignity. You wanted the apology. You needed your nervous system back. You wanted the reunion. You needed emotional safety. You wanted the sign. You needed the cycle to end. And perhaps the divine, in its quiet wisdom, knew that if the door stayed open, you would keep walking through it before you were fully healed. Not because you are weak. Because you love deeply. Because you see potential. Because you understand people's wounds. Because you know how to hold space. Because your compassion sometimes moves faster than your discernment. Chosen ones often do this. They see the soul of a person before they respect the reality of the person. They see what someone could become. They see the scared child behind the avoidant behavior. They see the trauma behind the silence. They see the light under the fear. And all of that may be real. But you cannot build a relationship with someone's potential while their patterns are still harming your peace. You cannot keep handing your heart to the version of them that only appears in rare moments. You cannot make a home in someone's almost readiness. That is why silence stepped in. It protected you from your own tendency to overextend. From your habit of giving one more chance. From your ability to explain away pain with spiritual language. From the part of you that would rather be hurt with hope than alone with truth. There is nothing to shame there. Only something to understand. The silence was not saying, you are unloved. It was saying, you are not available for this cycle anymore. Quietly. Firmly. Again and again. Every time the door did not open. Every time your message went unanswered. Every time they pulled away. Every time circumstances blocked the reunion. Every time your body felt heavy at the thought of going back. Protection. 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 Not always from the person. Sometimes from the pattern you become around the person. That distinction matters. Maybe they are not evil. Maybe they are not intentionally cruel. Maybe they are wounded. Maybe they are confused. Maybe they are truly your mirror. Maybe they are on their own journey of awakening. But what happens to you inside the connection as it currently exists? Do you become more honest? More peaceful? More rooted? More alive? Or do you become anxious? Hypervigilant? Over-explaining? Self-abandoning? Waiting? Shrinking? Suspended? That is the question protection asks. Not, are they your twin flame? But, are you losing yourself in the way this is unfolding? Because sacred love is not supposed to require self-erasure. Even when it is challenging. Even when it mirrors you. Even when it awakens deep wounds. The mirror should lead you back to yourself, not trap you in an endless loop of emotional starvation. And if the connection is not yet able to do that, silence may become the teacher. Distance may become the boundary. Separation may become the medicine. Not forever, necessarily. But for now. For the version of you that needs to heal. For the version of them that needs to face themselves. For the bond that cannot mature while both souls keep reenacting the same wound. This is where separation becomes sacred. Not romanticized. Sacred. There is nothing glamorous about lying awake at night, wondering if they feel it too. Nothing glamorous about crying quietly so nobody hears. Nothing glamorous about pretending you are fine while your chest still aches from something you cannot explain. Nothing glamorous about missing someone you know you cannot chase. But there is something sacred about choosing not to abandon yourself in the middle of that ache. There is something sacred about letting silence do what your desperation could not. There is something sacred about allowing distance to protect what closeness kept confusing. You may not see it while you are in it. You may only feel the loss. The absence. The empty space where the cycle used to live. But over time, that empty space becomes a sanctuary. At first, it is uncomfortable. You keep wanting to fill it. With their energy. With old messages. With readings. With theories. With daydreams. With imagined conversations. With future possibilities. Anything but the raw present moment. But if you stay with the emptiness long enough, it changes texture. It becomes softer. Quieter. Less threatening. You begin to place yourself there. Your routines. Your breath. Your healing. Your creativity. Your body. Your friendships that feel safe. Your prayers that do not revolve around one person returning. Your mornings that no longer begin with checking for signs. Your nights that no longer end with begging the universe for proof. Little by little, the space that once felt like abandonment begins to feel like protection. You start to understand why life would not let you keep filling it with the same cycle. It was reserved for something cleaner. Something more honest. Something your soul could actually breathe inside. Maybe that something is a higher version of the twin flame connection. Maybe it is reunion after real growth. Maybe it is a deeper union with yourself before anything outside changes. Maybe it is a love you have not yet imagined because you were too attached to the one that kept hurting you. You do not have to know yet. The silence is not asking you to solve the whole future. It is asking you to stop repeating the past. That is enough for now. Stop repeating the past. Stop returning to the doorway that leaves you bleeding. Stop confusing anxiety with guidance. Stop mistaking emotional intensity for emotional safety. Stop calling a closed door punishment when it may be the only reason you did not go back and lose another piece of yourself. There is a quiet dignity in not going back. Not because you hate them. Not because you have no feelings. Not because you have moved on perfectly. But because you can finally admit, this cycle has taught me what it came to teach me. That sentence is powerful. This cycle has taught me what it came to teach me. It taught me where I abandoned myself. It taught me how deeply I can love. It taught me what I confuse with intimacy. It taught me how old wounds speak through present longing. It taught me that I cannot heal by trying to earn love from someone who is not ready to give it. It taught me that silence can hurt and still protect. It taught me that my peace is not something I should keep sacrificing to prove that a bond is real. And once you can say that, the cycle begins losing authority. The pull may still exist. The memories may still come. The bond may still echo through your quiet moments. But you are not as easily moved by it. You can feel without following. You can remember without returning. You can love without re-entering. You can miss without messaging. This is not easy. It is one of the hardest parts of the journey, because it requires you to become loyal to your healing while your heart still feels connected. Anyone can walk away when they feel nothing. It takes a different kind of strength to step back while love is still alive. A softer strength. A stronger softness. The kind that whispers, "I love you, but I will not keep meeting you inside the same wound." That is sacred boundary. And if the twin flame connection is real, that boundary does not destroy what is meant. It purifies what is immature. It stops feeding the runner-chaser wound. It stops rewarding avoidance. It stops turning your longing into emotional labor. It gives both souls a chance to meet themselves. Your silence, when rooted in self-respect, becomes different from the silence that once wounded you. Their silence may have felt like confusion. Your silence becomes clarity. Their silence may have felt like avoidance. Your silence becomes healing. Their silence may have left you guessing. Your silence brings you back to truth. This is not a game. It is not punishment. It is not trying to make them miss you. It is the sacred act of no longer making yourself available to the cycle. And yes, they may feel it. They may feel the energetic shift. They may sense that your energy is no longer reaching for them in panic. They may notice the absence of your emotional availability. They may feel the space you created. But the purpose is not to force them to awaken. The purpose is to stop abandoning yourself while waiting for them to awaken. That is the shift. That is the protection. That is the deeper healing. Because the same heart that once prayed for them to come back now begins praying for truth. Not just reunion. Truth. Not just contact. Growth. Not just signs. Embodiment. Not just feelings. Responsibility. You begin to say, if this returns, let it return changed. Let it return honest. Let it return with both of us more whole. Let it return only if it can honor the peace I fought so hard to find. That is not giving up. That is consecrating the connection. It is placing it somewhere sacred instead of dragging it back into the old pattern. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for a sacred bond is stop participating in its lower expression. Stop feeding the chaos. Stop chasing the runner. Stop explaining your worth. Stop letting absence become addiction. Stop calling pain proof. Let the silence protect the space until both souls can meet without repeating the same wound. This is difficult, but it is holy in the most human way. The kind of holiness that happens when you do not send the text, when you breathe through the memory, when you cry and still choose peace, when you admit you miss them, but no longer let missing become a command, when you close the door softly, not with hatred, but with trembling self-respect. There is a moment on this journey when you realize protection is not always something that keeps pain away. Sometimes protection is what keeps you from turning pain into a lifestyle. It keeps you from building a home inside uncertainty. It keeps you from becoming fluent in abandonment. It keeps you from accepting emotional hunger as your normal state. It keeps you from mistaking the repetition of a wound for the return of a soulmate. And maybe that is what the silence has been doing all along. Guarding you. Not from love. From repeating the version of love that made you forget yourself. The silence has been standing at the door of your heart saying, "No, not like this. No more returning to the same wound. No more making excuses for what keeps hurting you. No more lowering your standards just because the connection feels sacred. No more abandoning your body's truth. No more confusing longing with alignment. No more entering the same room and expecting a different ending. And at first, you may resist that protection. You may cry against it. You may bargain with it. You may ask the universe why it would let you feel such a connection only to make you let go. But slowly, through the ache, you begin to understand. You were not being denied love. You were being trained for a love that does not require self-betrayal. You were not being punished with silence. You were being protected from the noise of the cycle. You were not being abandoned. You were being returned to yourself. And one day, the silence that once made you feel unwanted begins to feel like a sacred boundary around your becoming. You start to feel grateful for the doors that did not open. Not because they did not hurt. They did. But because you can finally see what would have happened if they had opened too soon. You would have gone back. You would have accepted less. You would have called it destiny. You would have ignored your body. You would have confused the relief of reunion with the reality of healing. You would have mistaken contact for change. And life loved you too much to let you keep repeating what your soul came here to outgrow. Chosen one, the silence was protecting your heart from repeating the same cycle. Even when you did not understand it. Even when you hated it. Even when it felt unfair. Even when you thought you were losing the only connection that had ever touched you so deeply. It was protecting the part of you that was finally learning to stop chasing what could not yet meet you. It was protecting the peace you had not learned to value. It was protecting your nervous system from another round of uncertainty. It was protecting your future from being trapped in your past. And now, as that protection becomes clearer, something inside you begins to shift again. Because protection is not the final destination. Protection creates the space. But what grows inside that space? Emotional capacity. The ability to love without disappearing. The ability to feel deeply without collapsing. The ability to hold connection without losing yourself. And that is the next sacred layer. Because once the old cycle loses its grip, your heart begins learning how to hold love in a completely different way. Lesson of this chapter. The silence was not always rejection. Sometimes it was protection. It protected you from returning to the same cycle, accepting the same crumbs, reopening the same wound, and calling the same pain destiny just because the connection felt powerful. The emotional truth is simple. A closed door is not always the universe denying you love. Sometimes it is life refusing to let you abandon yourself again. Your silence, when rooted in self-respect, is not punishment. It is a sacred boundary. It gives your heart room to heal, your nervous system room to breathe, and your soul room to stop repeating what it has already outgrown. Chapter 7. You were learning how to hold love without losing yourself. There was a time when love made me disappear. Not suddenly. Not in one dramatic moment. It happened quietly. A little less honesty here. A little more patience there. A little more silence when something hurt. A little more understanding when I was actually aching. A little more waiting. A little more explaining. A little more pretending I did not need what I needed. And slowly, without realizing it, I became someone I barely recognized. I called it devotion. I called it loyalty. I called it unconditional love. But underneath all of that, there was a quieter truth I did not want to face. I was afraid that if I stayed fully myself, love would leave. Maybe you know what that feels like. Maybe you have been in a connection where your whole inner world started organizing itself around someone else's mood. Their energy became the weather. If they were warm, you felt safe. If they were distant, your whole body tightened. If they replied sweetly, you could breathe again. If they went quiet, you started replaying everything you said, everything you did, every moment where maybe you were too much. And the hardest part, from the outside, nobody could see it. You still smiled. You still worked. You still answered people normally. You still looked composed. But inside, you were scanning, listening, feeling, waiting, trying to sense whether the connection was still alive, trying to know whether they were pulling away, trying to stay close without asking for too much, trying to love them without becoming inconvenient. That is a quiet kind of suffering, the kind that does not always look like heartbreak. It looks like overthinking. It looks like checking your phone too often. It looks like rereading a message and trying to hear the tone behind the words. It looks like feeling a small wave of panic when they type differently than usual. It looks like becoming hyper-aware of every shift in someone's attention. A shorter text, a colder pause. A different emoji. No good night. No morning message. A look that does not last as long. A voice that feels slightly less soft. And suddenly, your nervous system reacts before your mind can reason. Your stomach drops. Your chest tightens. Your breathing changes. You become alert. Not because anything dramatic happened. Because love, for you, started to feel like something that could vanish if you failed to monitor it carefully enough. Pause there. That is not weakness. That is a nervous system that learned to survive uncertainty. A heart that learned to study people because it never felt safe enough to simply be loved. And in a twin flame connection, this can become even more intense. Because the bond can feel so deep, so familiar, so impossible to explain, that their smallest shift feels enormous. With someone else, a delayed reply might be annoying. With them, it feels like the floor disappears. With someone else, a quiet day might be normal. With them, it feels like a spiritual emergency. With someone else, distance might mean they are busy. With them, distance can awaken every abandonment wound you thought you had outgrown. And suddenly, you are not just responding to the present moment. You are responding to every old moment that felt like this. Every time someone changed without warning. Every time affection became conditional. Every time you had to guess what was wrong. Every time love felt close, then disappeared. Every time you were left trying to understand silence. That is why solitude had to teach you something deeper than patience. It had to teach you self-possession. The ability to remain inside yourself while loving another. The ability to feel deeply without handing over the keys to your peace. The ability to care without collapsing. The ability to be open without becoming emotionally homeless. Because before sacred solitude, maybe love meant leaving yourself. Maybe you thought connection required constant adjustment. You changed your tone. You delayed your needs. You softened your truth. You made your emotions smaller. You became careful. Careful with your words. Careful with your timing. Careful with your needs. Careful with your honesty. Careful not to ask too much. Careful not to scare them. Careful not to lose them. But love that requires you to become a smaller version of yourself is not sacred union. It is survival. Raw honesty? Sometimes we confuse being easy to love with being easy to neglect. We become so understanding that people no longer have to meet us. We become so patient that our pain has no place to go. We become so spiritually mature that we forget we are still human. We say, I understand their wounds, while ignoring our own. We say, they need time, while abandoning our own emotional needs. We say, I can hold space, while slowly losing space for ourselves. And maybe that was part of your old pattern. Not because you were foolish, because your heart is generous, because you feel deeply, because you can see beyond behavior, because you sense people's pain underneath their silence. Because when you love, you do not just love the surface. You love the hidden room, the scared part, the guarded part, the version of them they rarely show anyone. That is beautiful. But it can also become dangerous if you start loving someone's potential more than you respect your own reality. You may see their soul, but your body still feels the inconsistency. You may understand their fear, but your heart still needs care. You may know they are wounded, but your nervous system still deserves peace. There is a quiet line between compassion and self-abandonment. And solitude helped you feel that line. At first, being alone may have felt like punishment. Like no one was choosing you. Like love had stepped away. Like the universe had placed you in a room with your own ache and locked the door. But over time, something subtle happened. Without another person's energy pulling on you, you began to feel your own again. Your own rhythm. Your own needs. Your own breath. Your own preferences. Your own truth. Maybe you realized you did not actually like how anxious you became around inconsistent people. Maybe you realized you were tired of being the emotional translator in every connection. Maybe you realized you had spent years being low maintenance because deep down, you were afraid your real needs would make people leave. Maybe you realized you had been proud of needing so little. But needing so little was not peace. It was adaptation. It was what you learned when needing more felt unsafe. Solitude interrupts that adaptation. It asks you uncomfortable questions. Who are you when you are not trying to be chosen? What do you actually want when you are not shaping yourself around someone else's capacity? What would you say if you were not afraid of being too much? What would you stop tolerating if you believed love would still find you? What does your body know that your longing keeps trying to silence? These questions can feel like standing under a harsh light, but they are not meant to shame you. They are meant to bring you back into your own center, back into your own body, back into the self you kept leaving every time someone else's energy became more important than your own peace. And maybe this return started in very small ways. Not dramatic transformation, not suddenly becoming fearless, just small acts of self-return. You stopped answering immediately when your body needed time. You stopped explaining your feelings to people who only wanted to debate them. You stopped pretending you were fine with uncertainty. You stopped calling confusion mystery. You stopped letting someone's silence turn you into a detective. You stopped making another person's emotional limitation a reflection of your worth. Small things, quiet things, but they mattered. You began to notice the moment you were about to abandon yourself. That moment right before you said, "It's okay," when it was not okay. That moment right before you apologized for having a feeling. That moment right before you sent a long message trying to be understood by someone committed to staying unavailable. That moment right before you accepted a crumb because you were afraid there would be nothing else. That moment right before you betrayed your own boundary to avoid making them uncomfortable. And instead of moving automatically, you paused. Maybe your hands shook. Maybe your chest tightened. Maybe you still wanted to choose the old pattern. But something in you whispered, "Stay with yourself this time." That whisper was sacred. That whisper was the beginning of a new kind of love. Not love as performance. Not love as chasing. Not love as emotional collapse. Love with roots. Love that can feel deeply and still stand upright. Love that can say, "I care about you, but I will not disappear to keep you close." That sentence changes everything. Because the twin flame journey is not only about whether someone comes back. It is about who you become while you are waiting, healing, releasing, remembering, grieving, and rising. Do you become more yourself? Or less? Do you become more honest? Or more afraid? Do you become more grounded? Or more dependent? Do you become more loving? Or more self-abandoning? These are not easy questions, but they reveal the direction of the connection. A sacred bond, even when challenging, should eventually lead you into consciousness. If it only keeps you trapped in panic, obsession, and self-erasure, something in the dynamic needs to be healed before it can be called union. Because union is not two people clinging to each other from their wounds. Union is two souls meeting without demanding that the other become a replacement for the self they abandoned. That is deeper than romance. That is emotional maturity. And Solitude was teaching you how to become emotionally mature without becoming emotionally closed. There is a difference. Some people get hurt and call their walls healing. They say, "I don't care anymore. I don't need anyone. I'm done with love. No one gets access to me." And sometimes, for a little while, that armor feels like relief. It feels safer than being open. But armor is not the same as healing. Armor protects you from pain by blocking love too. Healing protects you through discernment. Armor says, "Never again." Healing says, "Not like that again." Armor becomes numb. Healing becomes wise. Armor closes the heart. Healing teaches the heart how to open with boundaries. Your solitude was not meant to make you cold. It was meant to make you whole. Whole enough to love without begging. Whole enough to miss someone without losing your mind. Whole enough to feel a spiritual connection without letting it override your human needs. Whole enough to say, "I honor this bond, but I also honor myself." That is the balance many chosen ones are learning. You are not here to deny the depth of what you feel. You are also not here to be consumed by it. You are not here to pretend the connection meant nothing. You are also not here to let it become everything. You are not here to punish someone for being wounded. You are also not here to become the place where their wounds go unchallenged. This is the emotional contradiction. You can love someone deeply and still need distance. You can feel the bond and still refuse the cycle. You can hold compassion and still require accountability. You can hope for healing and still stop waiting in pain. You can believe in divine timing and still live your life now. Not later. Not after they understand. Not after they return. Now. Because one of the ways you lose yourself in love is by postponing your life for someone else's readiness. You stop making plans because part of you is waiting. You stop opening to new experiences because part of you is emotionally loyal to a possibility. You stop showing up fully in the present because your heart is sitting beside a door that may or may not open. And slowly, your life becomes a hallway. Not a home. A hallway. A place of waiting. A place of listening. A place where everything is temporary until they decide what they feel. Chosen one, your life is not a hallway. Your soul did not come here to stand outside another person's awakening, holding your breath. Your love may be sacred. Your connection may be real. But your life is also sacred. Your mornings. Your body. Your creativity. Your friendships. Your laughter. Your quiet dreams. Your work. Your healing, your future, your relationship with yourself. These cannot remain suspended because someone else is not ready to meet what they feel. Solitude taught you to stop waiting as if your life belongs to the connection. It taught you that love can be part of your journey without becoming the center that swallows everything else. It taught you how to bring your energy back from the places you had left it. From old conversations, from imagined futures, from their silence. From their social media, from the memory of their eyes, from the hope that one day they will finally speak clearly. You called your energy back, piece by piece, painfully sometimes, imperfectly, but you called it back. And when your energy returns to you, your body notices. Your chest feels less tight, your mornings feel less haunted, your decisions feel less dependent on whether they reach out. You begin to feel your own presence again. That may sound simple, but it is not. To feel your own presence after losing yourself in someone else is a kind of rebirth. A quiet one. No fireworks. Just a morning where you wake up and realize you did not think of them first. A song comes on and you do not fall apart. A memory rises and you let it pass without turning it into a story. You laugh and it surprises you. You make a plan for your future, and for the first time, it does not include waiting for someone else to decide your worth. That is sacred. That is the self returning. And once you begin returning to yourself, love starts to feel different. You no longer want a connection where you have to guess your place. You no longer want a bond that only feels alive when you are anxious. You no longer want to be the one doing all the emotional holding. You no longer want to be someone's secret comfort while they avoid real intimacy. You no longer want eye contact without accountability. You no longer want spiritual intensity without human consistency. You want something more grounded now. Not less deep. More real. You want love that can meet you in ordinary moments. Not just cosmic ones. Love that can speak. Love that can listen. Love that can apologize. Love that can stay present when the conversation gets uncomfortable. Love that does not disappear every time vulnerability gets too close. Love that does not require you to become a mind reader. Love that can hold silence without using it as a weapon. Love that feels like breath, not suffocation. And yes, twin flame love can become that. But only when both people stop using the connection to reenact their wounds. Only when the runner stops running from themselves. Only when the chaser stops chasing outside themselves. Only when both souls realize that intensity is not enough. Recognition is not enough. Longing is not enough. The bond must become embodied. It must become respectful. It must become emotionally responsible. It must become a place where both people can remain themselves. That is true union. Not losing yourself in someone because they feel like home, but becoming so rooted in yourself that when home appears, you do not abandon your own foundation to enter it. There is a strange beauty in this. The more you return to yourself, the more capable you become of real intimacy. At first, that may sound backward. You might think intimacy means merging, becoming one, feeling everything together, losing the line between you and them. And yes, deep love can feel like merging for moments. But healthy intimacy also requires separateness. Two whole beings, two nervous systems, two sets of needs, two truths, two paths, two people who can come close without one disappearing into the other. If you cannot remain yourself in love, closeness becomes dangerous. Every disagreement feels like abandonment. Every boundary feels like rejection. Every silence feels like the end. Every need feels like a threat. Every distance feels unbearable. But when you have learned to stay with yourself, love no longer has to carry the impossible weight of completing you. You can let someone love you without making them your source. You can let someone affect you without letting them control you. You can feel the pull without losing your direction. You can open your heart without handing over your center. That is what Solitude was teaching. How to love from fullness, not from fear. How to connect without clinging. How to receive without becoming dependent. How to care without monitoring. How to stay open without becoming available to harm. This kind of love is quieter than the old pattern. It does not always create the same rush. It does not always feel like a dramatic movie scene. Sometimes it feels like telling the truth without shaking as much. Sometimes it feels like saying, "I need clarity," and not apologizing afterward. Sometimes it feels like letting someone be disappointed without rushing to fix their feelings. Sometimes it feels like hearing silence and not immediately assuming you are unlovable. Sometimes it feels like choosing not to chase and feeling grief, but also peace. That peace is new. It may feel unfamiliar at first. A part of you may miss the intensity. A part of you may wonder, if I'm not suffering, does it mean I don't love them anymore? No. It means love is no longer being measured by how much pain you can endure. It means your nervous system is learning that devotion does not have to look like self-sacrifice. It means your heart is learning a new language. The language of grounded love. Grounded love says, I can love you and still tell the truth. I can care about your wounds without becoming responsible for healing them. I can miss you without returning to a cycle that harms me. I can hold this connection with tenderness without making it my entire identity. I can be open to union without abandoning my life in the meantime. That is the kind of love that changes the twin flame dynamic. Because when you stop disappearing, your energy shifts. You no longer approach the connection from hunger. You approach it from wholeness. You no longer say, please choose me. Your energy says, meet me if you can meet me in truth. You no longer chase someone's avoidance. You let avoidance reveal itself. You no longer treat their fear as a problem you must solve. You let them face it. You no longer overgive to keep the bond alive. You allow the bond to show whether it can breathe without your constant emotional labor. That is terrifying at first. Because part of you may think, if I stop holding it together, will it fall apart? And sometimes, yes. Sometimes a connection only survives because one person keeps abandoning themselves to maintain it. But if something falls apart the moment you stop betraying yourself, was it truly holding you? Or were you holding it? That question can hurt. But it can also free you. Real love does not require you to do all the carrying. A sacred connection does not need you to become smaller, so it can remain intact. If your absence of self-betrayal destroys the bond, then the bond was built on your sacrifice, not mutual truth. Let that be a mirror, not to make you bitter, to make you clear. Because clarity is mercy. It saves you from calling endurance love. It saves you from confusing emotional labor with devotion. It saves you from thinking that if you just hold on longer, love will eventually become safe. Chosen one, you are learning how to hold love without losing yourself. Not how to stop loving. Not how to erase the bond. Not how to become unaffected. You are learning how to remain present inside your own body while your heart feels something powerful. You are learning how to let love move through you without letting it uproot you. You are learning how to stay soft and still have a spine. Soft heart. Clear boundary. Open soul. Grounded body. That is the balance. And maybe you are still practicing it. Maybe some days you feel strong. Other days, one memory pulls you back. One dream shakes you. One sign makes you wonder. One message from them, or even the thought of one, makes your whole system light up again. Do not shame that. Healing is not linear. The goal is not to become someone who never gets triggered. The goal is to become someone who returns to themselves faster. Before, a trigger might have taken you out for weeks. Now maybe it takes a day, then an hour, then a few breaths. That is growth, not perfection. Return. That is the sacred word here. Return. Return to your breath. Return to your body. Return to your truth. Return to your life. Return to the part of you that does not need to chase to be worthy. Return to the self that existed before the wound convinced you love had to be earned. And each time you return, you become more capable of real union. Because real union requires two people who know how to come home to themselves. Not two people who make each other responsible for their inner emptiness. Not two people who confuse fusion with intimacy. Not two people who collapse into the bond and call it destiny. Two souls, awake enough to see their wounds, humble enough to own their patterns, brave enough to communicate, grounded enough to stay present, loving enough to not use the connection as an excuse for harm. That is what your solitude was preparing you for. It taught you that love is not proven by how much of yourself you can give away. Love is proven by how truthfully you can remain yourself while giving. It taught you that boundaries do not make love less spiritual. They make love safer. It taught you that needing respect does not make you less evolved. It makes you honest. It taught you that being chosen by someone else means very little if you have to unchoose yourself to receive it. Sit with that. Being chosen by someone else means very little if you have to unchoose yourself to receive it. That is a sentence many hearts need to hear. Because maybe you spent years hoping someone would finally choose you. But solitude asked a deeper question. Have you chosen yourself? Not in a shallow way. Not just by saying affirmations. But in the moment it costs something. When choosing yourself means not sending the message. When choosing yourself means leaving the conversation. When choosing yourself means telling the truth. When choosing yourself means allowing someone to misunderstand you instead of shrinking to be accepted. When choosing yourself means grieving a connection you still feel. Because the current version of it cannot hold your peace. That is where self-love becomes real. Not pretty. Real. And that kind of self-choice creates an energetic shift your twin flame may feel before they understand it. Because you are no longer reaching from the wound. You are no longer orbiting their fear. You are no longer trying to become the answer to their avoidance. You are no longer offering yourself as a place where they can hide from their own growth. You have become rooted. Still loving. Still tender. Still open to what is true. But rooted. And rooted energy is powerful. It does not beg. It does not chase. It does not punish. It does not perform. It simply stands. Quietly. Clearly. And that standing changes everything. Because someone who only knew how to relate to your overgiving may not know what to do with your wholeness. Someone who is used to your chasing may suddenly feel the absence of your pursuit. Someone who depended on your emotional availability may notice that your peace now has a boundary. Someone who felt your soul may begin to feel the difference between your love and your self-abandonment. Your love remains, but the leaking stops. The desperation stops. The energetic reaching stops. The silent begging stops. And what is left is something purer. A love that no longer crawls. A love that no longer bargains. A love that no longer says, I will become less so you can stay comfortable. Instead, it says, I can meet you deeply, but I will not meet you by leaving myself. That is the lesson. That is the initiation. That is the sacred shift from attachment to embodied love. And as this shift settles into you, life begins to respond differently. You may attract people who feel safer. You may notice old dynamics losing their grip. You may feel less drawn to emotional unavailability. You may become more sensitive to inconsistency, not because you are fragile, but because your body no longer accepts it as normal. You may feel uncomfortable around people you used to tolerate easily. You may stop laughing at jokes that diminish you. You may stop explaining your depth to people who are committed to the surface. You may stop confusing intensity with intimacy. You may stop offering wife-level devotion, soul-level understanding, and endless emotional labor to people who have not even learned how to be honest with themselves. That is not arrogance. That is alignment. Your standards are not rising because you think you are better than anyone. They are rising because you are no longer willing to love in ways that require you to disappear. And this prepares you for the next phase of the twin flame journey. Because once you can hold love without losing yourself, the dynamic changes. You stop feeding the runner-chaser loop. You stop turning longing into movement. You stop letting fear decide your behavior. You stop making their unreadiness more important than your own healing. And whether they come forward or stay away, you remain with yourself. That is freedom. Not the freedom of not caring. The freedom of not being controlled by what you care about. There is a difference. You still have a heart. You still feel. You still remember. But you are no longer a prisoner of the feeling. You are no longer owned by the bond. You are no longer waiting for someone else's awakening to give you permission to live. And that is when your energy becomes magnetic in a new way. Not loud. Not needy. Not trying to be seen. Just whole. You become someone whose presence says, I know what I carry now. You become someone whose silence is not a wound, but a sanctuary. You become someone whose love has depth, but also direction. You become someone who can hold a sacred connection without worshiping the person at the expense of the self. And maybe that is the very thing your twin flame needed to feel. Not your panic. Not your pursuit. Not your pain. Your wholeness. Because wholeness invites truth. It does not force it. It does not chase it. It simply creates a space where anything false becomes uncomfortable. Your self-possession becomes a mirror too. A quieter mirror. A stronger mirror. A mirror that says, I will no longer participate in the version of this connection that requires me to abandon myself. And that can awaken something. In them. In you. In the bond itself. But even if it does not happen immediately, something has already changed. You are no longer loving from the same place. You are no longer the version of yourself who believed love meant disappearing. You are no longer available to be emotionally consumed. You are no longer willing to call self-erasure devotion. You are learning the sacred art of staying. Not staying with them at all costs. Staying with yourself. Staying with your truth. Staying with your body. Staying with your peace. Staying with the part of you that knows love should not require inner exile. That is the real preparation. Because when love comes again, in whatever form it is meant to come, you will know how to receive it without handing yourself away. You will know how to listen to your body. You will know how to speak before resentment builds. You will know how to notice the difference between discomfort that stretches you and pain that diminishes you. You will know how to honor a soul connection while still requiring human care. You will know how to let someone close without letting them become the only place you exist. And that is sacred maturity. That is what solitude was shaping in you. Not a person who does not need love. A person who can love without self-abandonment. A person who can be intimate without becoming invisible. A person who can feel the fire without burning down their own home. So if you are in this chapter now, learning how to hold love without losing yourself, be patient. This is not a small lesson. It may touch every relationship you have ever had. It may bring up grief for all the times you became smaller. All the times you said yes when your body meant no. All the times you stayed silent to keep the peace. All the times you waited for someone else to choose you while forgetting that you had already left yourself. Let the grief come. Let it teach you. Let it soften you. But do not let it pull you back into the same pattern. You are allowed to become someone new in love. Someone more honest. Someone more grounded. Someone harder to manipulate through guilt. Someone less impressed by emotional intensity without emotional responsibility. Someone who still believes in sacred connection, but no longer uses spirituality to excuse self-abandonment. Chosen one, you were not being isolated because love forgot you. You were being taught how to remain. Remain in yourself. Remain in your body. Remain in your worth. Remain in your peace. So when love finally comes close, you do not disappear inside it. You meet it, eye to eye, heart open, feet grounded, soul awake. And you say, without begging, without shrinking, without fear controlling your voice, I can love you deeply and still belong to myself. That is the turning point. That is the sacred shift. That is the moment your energy changes from need to truth. And when that happens, your twin flame does not feel you the same way anymore. They no longer feel the old reaching, the old panic, the old emotional availability that had no boundary. They feel the space you created, the space where your self-abandonment used to be, the space where your wholeness now stands. And whether they understand it or not, they feel it. Which brings us into the next chapter, because your twin flame can feel the sacred space you created, even before they know what to do with it. Lesson of this chapter: solitude taught you how to hold love without losing yourself. It showed you where devotion had become self-abandonment, where patience had become silence, and where compassion had become a place for other people to avoid accountability. The emotional truth is simple. Real love does not ask you to disappear. You can love deeply and still have boundaries. You can feel a sacred bond and still choose your peace. You can miss someone and still remain rooted in yourself. Your solitude was not teaching you to stop loving. It was teaching you to love from wholeness, not fear. And once you can say, I can love you deeply and still belong to myself, the entire connection begins to shift. Chapter 8. Your twin flame feels the space you created before they understand it. Sometimes the shift happens so quietly that you almost miss it. There is no announcement, no dramatic breakthrough, no sudden message from the sky, no cinematic moment where everything changes at once. It begins in the small places. You stop reaching for your phone the second you wake up. You stop rereading old conversations like they are scripture. You stop trying to feel their energy every time the room gets quiet. You stop turning every dream, every song, every number, every passing memory into proof that something is about to happen. Not because you stopped caring. That would be too simple. You still care, maybe more deeply than you can explain. But your caring no longer leaks out of you in the form of panic. Your love no longer crawls across the floor asking to be noticed. Your silence no longer says, please feel my absence. Your absence no longer comes from wounded strategy. It comes from something steadier now. A return. A boundary. A sacred decision to stop abandoning yourself just to keep an invisible thread alive. And that kind of shift can be felt, even when nobody says it out loud. Even when your twin flame does not fully understand what changed. Even when they try to explain it away. They feel it. Maybe not in words. Maybe not consciously. Maybe they do not sit there and say, their energy has returned to itself. But something in them notices. The space is different. The connection is different. You are different. And not because you are trying to become unreachable. Not because you are punishing them. Not because you are playing a game. You simply stop making yourself emotionally available to the version of the connection that kept wounding you. That changes everything. Pause there. Because this is one of the most misunderstood parts of the twin flame journey. People think energetic space means forcing someone to miss you. Withdrawing so they chase. Going silent so they panic. Becoming unavailable so they finally realize your worth. But sacred space is not manipulation. Sacred space is what happens when you stop using your energy to beg for a love that must freely awaken. It is not a tactic. It is a healing. It is the moment your soul says, I will no longer feed this bond from my wound. That sentence carries power. Because for a long time, maybe your energy was still reaching even when your body was still. You may not have been texting them. You may not have been calling. You may not have been openly chasing. But inside, you were still orbiting, wondering what they were doing, wondering if they missed you, wondering if they felt the pull, wondering if they regretted what happened, wondering if they would come back, wondering if they could sense your pain, wondering if the connection meant anything to them at all. That inner orbit is exhausting. No one sees it. From the outside, you look quiet. You look calm. You look like you are moving on. But inside, part of your energy is still standing at their door, hoping they will open it. And solitude taught you to call that energy back. Not all at once. Piece by piece. From the fantasy. From the memory. From the ache. From the future you imagined. From the apology you never received. From the version of them you kept waiting for. From the spiritual signs you used to hold yourself in place. From the hope that if you loved silently enough, they would finally feel safe enough to come forward. You called yourself back. And the moment you do that, the energetic dynamic shifts. Because now, the connection no longer runs on your overextension. The bond no longer feeds from your constant emotional offering. The runner-chaser pattern loses one of its anchors. The old version of the connection cannot survive the same way when you stop participating in it from fear. And your twin flame feels that. They may not know why they suddenly think of you at random times. They may not know why your absence feels different now. They may not know why the silence no longer feels like something they can rely on you to fill. They may not know why the old comfort of your emotional availability is gone. But something inside them registers the change. A subtle discomfort. A strange awareness. A quiet pull. Maybe they are driving, and your name crosses their mind with no obvious reason. Maybe they see something that reminds them of you, and for a moment their chest tightens. Maybe they open a message thread and do not know what to say. Maybe they feel the urge to reach out, then close the screen because the emotion is too honest. Maybe they sense deep down that you are no longer waiting in the same way. And that can be unsettling. Not because your energy is attacking them, but because your wholeness is no longer cushioning their avoidance. Before, they may have felt your love even when they were distant. They may have felt that invisible reassurance that you were still there, still open, still hoping, still energetically available, still willing to understand, still willing to forgive before accountability, still willing to meet them in the space between their fear and your longing. But now, there is space. Quiet space. Clean space. Not hostile. Not bitter. Just no longer overflowing toward them. And to someone who has been running from the mirror, that space can feel like a mirror too. Because now they have to feel the connection without your emotional labor softening the edges. They have to feel their own absence, their own silence, their own unreadiness, their own choices, their own fear. Your withdrawal from the cycle makes room for their awareness. And this is where a deeper truth appears. You cannot awaken someone by chasing them. You can only invite truth by standing in your own. Chasing may create movement, but it does not create maturity. Pressure may create a response, but it does not create readiness. Long messages may create temporary understanding, but they do not create embodiment. Begging someone to recognize the bond may make them look at it for a moment, but it cannot make them hold it. Real recognition has to rise from inside them. And sometimes the only thing that allows it to rise is the space where your pursuing energy used to be. That space becomes loud. Not loud like noise. Loud like absence. Loud like a room after someone meaningful has walked out. Loud like the empty chair at the table. Loud like a phone that no longer lights up with the message they expected you to send. Loud like your energy no longer waiting at the edge of their life. And they may feel that before they understand it. This does not mean they will immediately act. That is important. Feeling is not the same as readiness. Missing is not the same as maturity. Regret is not the same as transformation. A person can feel your absence deeply and still not have the courage to meet you honestly. A person can sense the connection and still choose avoidance. A person can think of you often and still remain silent. A person can miss your energy and still not be prepared to respect your heart. So this chapter is not about waiting for them to feel it. It is about understanding the sacred power of no longer abandoning yourself energetically. Their response is not the measure of your healing. Your peace is. Their awakening is not the proof of your worth. Your return to yourself is. Still, there is something undeniable about the way energy changes when you stop chasing. You become less accessible to confusion, less available to half-truths, less moved by emotional crumbs. less willing to translate inconsistency into destiny, less likely to mistake a sudden return for real growth. You begin to observe instead of collapse. You let people show you who they are now, not who they might become in your imagination. And that shift can be felt by everyone around you, not just your twin flame. Old connections may try to pull on you and find that the old door does not open the same way. People who were used to your immediate response may notice you no longer rush. People who depended on your emotional labor may feel uncomfortable with your boundaries. People who enjoyed your warmth without honoring your depth may sense that access has changed. You are no longer open in the old way. You are still loving, still human, still tender. But your openness now has a gate, a sacred gate, and that gate is discernment. For a long time, maybe you thought love meant being endlessly available, always understanding, always forgiving, always soft, always reachable, always willing to hold the emotional weight. But solitude showed you that unlimited access is not the same as unconditional love. You can love someone and still protect the doorway to your peace. You can care and still not answer the moment your body says no. You can feel connected and still not pour energy into a bond that is not meeting you with responsibility. That is the sacred space you created. The space where self-abandonment used to live. The space where anxiety used to perform devotion. The space where longing used to become movement. The space where waiting used to become identity. Now that space belongs to you. And because it belongs to you, it becomes magnetic in a different way. Not magnetic like trying to attract them. Not magnetic like posting, performing, proving, or becoming someone else so they notice. Magnetic because wholeness has weight. Peace has presence. Self-respect has a frequency. A person who is no longer leaking energy into every unfinished attachment begins to feel grounded. Solid. Harder to manipulate. Harder to confuse. Harder to pull back into old cycles. There is a quiet authority in that. You do not have to announce it. People feel it in your silence. In your eyes. In the way you no longer over-explain. In the way you let a pause exist without rushing to fill it. In the way you can hear someone's uncertainty and not immediately make it your job to fix. In the way you stop making your emotional availability a reward for someone's inconsistency. And if your twin flame has known the version of you who reached, waited, hoped, and overheld the connection, this new version of you may feel unfamiliar. They may feel your softness is still there, but the desperation is gone. They may feel your love is still there, but the self-betrayal is gone. They may feel your presence in the field, but they no longer feel your energy chasing theirs. That is a profound shift. It can bring up their own mirror. They may wonder why you seem farther away, even if you have not said anything. They may feel the loss of the version of you who made it easy for them to stay unaccountable. They may sense that if they come forward now, they cannot come with the same half energy. They may feel, without words, that the old dynamic will not receive them anymore. And this is where sacred space becomes a test. Not a test of whether they love you. A test of whether they can meet you differently. Can they approach with honesty instead of curiosity? Can they speak with accountability instead of nostalgia? Can they meet your peace without trying to disturb it? Can they feel the bond without expecting you to carry it alone? Can they come closer without making you smaller? Can they stand before the mirror instead of running from what your presence reveals? These are deeper questions than, will they come back? Anyone can come back. Not everyone can return changed. A message is easy. A like is easy. A soft, I've been thinking about you is easy. A sudden emotional confession during a lonely night is easy. But embodiment? Consistency? Accountability? The courage to stay present after the emotional wave passes? That is different. And your sacred space protects you from confusing the two. Before, a small sign may have been enough to pull you back into hope. A message. A dream. A look. A little warmth. A song that felt too perfectly timed. You might have built an entire future from one moment. But now you breathe. You do not deny the feeling. You simply do not let it carry you away. You ask, what is actually being offered? Not spiritually, humanly. Is there clarity? Is there consistency? Is there emotional responsibility? Is there a willingness to communicate? Is there respect for the growth it took me to find peace? That is not distrust. That is wisdom. Your sacred space is not there to block love. It is there to make sure love arrives in a form that can honor you. And if it cannot honor you yet, the space remains. Softly, firmly, without hatred, without drama, without proving anything. This is the part of the journey where you begin to understand that your silence can be holy when it is rooted in self-return. There is wounded silence, and there is sacred silence. Wounded silence says, I hope they notice I'm gone. Sacred silence says, I am no longer leaving myself. Wounded silence is waiting for a reaction. Sacred silence is creating room for truth. Wounded silence still orbits them. Sacred silence comes home. Wounded silence punishes. Sacred silence protects. And you can feel the difference in your body. Wounded silence is tense. You keep checking, wondering, waiting, hoping they feel it. Sacred silence is still tender, yes, but cleaner. You may still miss them. You may still cry. You may still feel the bond. But underneath the ache, there is a quiet dignity. A sense that you are not acting from fear anymore. A sense that your absence is not a weapon. It is a sanctuary. That sanctuary changes your life. You begin to have moments that belong only to you again. You make coffee without turning the morning into a prayer for their return. You walk outside and notice the sky without searching for signs in every cloud. You hear a song and let it move through you without making it a message. You laugh without guilt. You rest without feeling like you should be energetically doing something for the connection. You stop living as if your healing is only valuable if it brings them back. That is a major turning point. Because for a while, maybe everything you did was secretly tied to them. You healed so they could feel the shift. You detached so they would come closer. You posted so they might see. You prayed so the union would happen. You improved yourself so the connection could finally work. But real healing begins when you stop making them the audience of your transformation. You are not healing to become irresistible. You are healing to become free. Free to love without bondage. Free to miss without collapsing. Free to open without abandoning your body. Free to receive without begging. Free to walk away from anything that cannot meet you in truth, even if it once felt destined. That freedom has a frequency. And yes, your twin flame may feel it. But the more important thing is that you feel it. You feel the difference between craving and calm, between hope and obsession, between openness and waiting, between love and energetic overextension, between a sacred bond and your wounded need to be chosen by it. And once you feel that difference, you cannot fully go back. You may have weak moments. You may still check sometimes. You may still wonder. You may still have days when the memory is louder than your peace. That does not mean you failed. It means you are human. But the old pattern no longer owns you the way it did. You recover faster. You return sooner. You catch yourself before you spiral too far. You can say, I miss them, without turning that sentence into a decision. You can say, I feel the connection, without making it an excuse to abandon your standards. You can say, I love them, without letting love become a doorway back into self-neglect. That is sacred growth. And that growth may be the very thing your twin flame senses. Not your longing, your groundedness. Not your emotional hunger, your wholeness. Not your silent begging, your quiet truth. There is a different kind of pull that comes from someone who has returned to themselves. It is not desperate. It is not demanding. It does not chase. It simply exists. And existence, when rooted in truth, can be more powerful than pursuit. Maybe that is why people sometimes come back when you finally stop waiting. Not always because the universe is playing a cruel game, but because your energy is no longer tangled in the old dynamic. The field clears. The pressure drops. The mirror becomes cleaner. The other person can feel the connection without your fear wrapped around it. But again, their return is not the point. The point is that you are no longer the same person they left, avoided, or misunderstood. You have become someone who can hold the connection without becoming consumed by it. Someone who can love without begging. Someone who can feel without leaking. Someone who can create space without using space as a weapon. Someone who understands that sacred love must be free, not forced. This matters because twin flame energy, when handled through attachment, becomes a storm. But when held through self-possession, it becomes a mirror for truth. And the truth is not always immediate reunion. Sometimes the truth is that both souls need more time. Sometimes the truth is that one person still cannot face themselves. Sometimes the truth is that the connection is real, but the current dynamic is not ready. Sometimes the truth is that love has to mature in separation before it can become safe in closeness. Sometimes the truth is that the sacred space you created is not a pause before union with them, but a doorway into union with yourself. And if you can accept that, even with trembling hands, you become powerful in a way attachment could never make you. You stop bargaining with the universe. You stop saying, "I will heal if it means they return." You start saying, "I will heal because I deserve to live fully." You stop saying, "Let them feel me." You start saying, "Let me feel myself again." You stop saying, "Make them understand." You start saying, "Help me honor what I already know." You stop saying, "Bring them back." You start saying, "Bring truth, bring peace, bring what is ready to meet me without requiring me to disappear." That is a different prayer, a more mature one, a quieter one, a braver one, and it changes the energy of everything. Your twin flame may feel the space before they understand it, but you are not creating it for their understanding. You are creating it for your becoming. You are creating it because your heart is no longer available to be a storage room for someone else's fear. You are creating it because your nervous system deserves peace. You are creating it because the connection deserves something higher than repetition. You are creating it because love that is forced becomes distorted. You are creating it because what is meant to meet you must meet you in truth, not in the old wound. And as you stand in that space, something beautiful begins to happen. You stop being afraid of being forgotten. That fear may not disappear completely, but it loses its teeth. Because you realize something. Anyone who can only remember you when you chase them is not meeting your soul. Anyone who can only feel your value when you withdraw has work to do. Anyone who needs your absence to appreciate your presence is not yet living in mature love. And anyone meant to meet you in truth will not require you to abandon yourself to remain visible. This is not harsh. It is clear. And clarity is one of the highest forms of self-love. There may still be tenderness. There may still be hope. There may still be a quiet place in your heart that says, if they grow, if they come honestly, if the connection can hold peace, I am open to what is true. That is okay. You do not have to slam your heart shut to heal. You can leave the door open to truth while closing the door to the cycle. That is the difference. You are not saying, never. You are saying, not like before. Not with confusion. Not with emotional crumbs. Not with silence that wounds. Not with avoidance dressed as depth. Not with me carrying the connection alone. Not with me disappearing so this can survive. Not with my peace as the price of your fear. That is sacred space. And your twin flame feels it because it is real. It is not a performance. It is not a mask. It is not a trick. It is the energetic result of you choosing yourself over and over again in the places where you once chose the wound. Every unsent message, every boundary, every breath through longing, every moment you turned your attention back to your life, every time you stopped feeding the fantasy, every time you let silence reveal instead of rushing to repair, every time you allowed them to face their own process without making yourself the bridge they could cross without changing. All of that created space. And space, when created from truth, becomes sacred. It becomes a field where only what is honest can remain. The false cannot breathe there for long. Half-love becomes uncomfortable there. Avoidance becomes visible there. Old patterns lose their hiding places there. And if love returns, it must return differently. Not perfectly. People are human. Healing is messy, but differently, more honestly, more consciously, with more responsibility, with more respect for the person you became in the silence. And if it does not return, then the space still served you. It gave you back your life. It gave you back your center. It taught you that your love is not wasted simply because someone could not meet it. It taught you that your energy is precious. It taught you that your silence can be whole. It taught you that you do not have to keep reaching for someone in order for the bond to be real. It taught you that the highest expression of a connection may sometimes begin with releasing your grip on the outcome. This is not easy. There will be days when you question it. Days when you wonder if creating space means losing them. Days when your heart says, what if they forget me? Days when your mind says, what if I am giving up too soon? Days when your body misses the old emotional high, even though your soul knows it was costing too much. In those moments, come back to this. Space does not destroy what is true. Space reveals what is true. If the bond depends on your constant self-abandonment, the space will expose that. If the connection only survives through your pursuit, the space will expose that. If their love exists only when you are available to be half met, the space will expose that. But if something real lives beneath the fear, if both souls are meant to grow, if the connection has a higher expression, space gives it room to breathe. Not control. Breathe. Not force. Mature. Not chase. Choose. That is the sacred purpose of the space you created. To stop the old distortion. To let truth rise without your panic trying to manage it. To let love, if it is real and ready, find you in a form that does not require you to abandon yourself. And maybe your twin flame feels that now. Maybe somewhere, in a moment they cannot explain, they feel the difference. Your energy is no longer pulling on them. Your silence is no longer begging. Your absence is no longer wounded. Your love is no longer tangled in fear. And that can awaken something. It can make them curious. It can make them uncomfortable. It can make them reflective. It can make them feel the mirror more clearly. But remember this. Their awakening is not your assignment. Your assignment is to remain true. To stay rooted. To protect the space you created. To honor the peace you fought for. To let love come only in the form that can respect your wholeness. And that is a very different kind of strength. Not loud strength. Not cold strength. A quiet strength. The kind that says, I do not need to chase what is meant to recognize me. The kind that says, I do not need to keep proving the depth of my love by suffering. The kind that says, I can create space and still remain open to truth. The kind that says, I am no longer willing to be the only one holding what was meant for two souls to honor. Chosen one, your twin flame feels the space you created before they understand it, because that space carries your healing. It carries every moment you chose not to chase. Every tear you did not turn into a message. Every longing you held without collapsing. Every boundary you created with shaking hands. Every piece of yourself you called back from the places it had been waiting. They feel it because your energy is no longer speaking the old language. It no longer says, please choose me. It says, meet me in truth. It no longer says, I will wait forever in pain. It says, I trust what is real to rise without my self-betrayal. It no longer says, I need you to complete me. It says, I am returning to myself, and only what honors that return may come close. That is sacred. That is powerful. That is the kind of space that changes the entire connection. But sacred space does not always lead to immediate reunion. Sometimes it first reveals whether both souls are truly ready. It reveals whether the bond can mature. Whether the silence can become honesty. Whether longing can become responsibility. Whether two people can meet without repeating the old wound. And this is where the next chapter begins. Because separation was not sent to destroy the bond. It was sent to test the depth of what could survive without control. Lesson of this chapter. Your twin flame may feel the space you created before they understand it. Not because you are manipulating them. Not because you are trying to make them chase. But because your energy has changed. You are no longer feeding the connection from fear, panic, longing, or self-abandonment. The emotional truth is simple. Sacred space is not a tactic. It is the moment you stop leaving yourself to keep a bond alive. Your silence becomes powerful when it is rooted in healing. Your absence becomes sacred when it is no longer punishment. Your love becomes cleaner when it stops begging. And whether they return or not, the space you created already did something holy. It gave you back to yourself. Chapter 9. Separation was testing the depth, not destroying the bond. I know how hard separation can feel. Not the poetic version. Not the version people talk about when they are trying to sound spiritual and detached. I mean the real version. The version where you wake up some mornings and feel strangely peaceful, then one small memory ruins the whole hour. A song, a place, a certain smell in the air, a phrase they used to say, the way sunlight hits a room and suddenly you remember the exact moment they looked at you like they wanted to come closer, but something inside them would not let them. And just like that, you are back there. Not fully, but enough. Enough for your chest to soften. Enough for your throat to tighten. Enough for your body to remember what your mind has been trying to release. Separation is strange like that. It does not always hurt loudly. Sometimes it hurts in small, ordinary moments. You are washing a cup, folding laundry, driving somewhere familiar, standing in line for coffee. Then their memory appears without asking permission. Not dramatic, not even clear, just a feeling, a pull somewhere deep inside you. And for a second, you wonder, do they feel this too? Pause there, because anyone who has walked through a twin flame separation knows that question. It is not just curiosity, it is ache. It is the part of you that wants to know whether the bond is still alive somewhere beyond the silence, whether the connection meant anything to them, whether you were the only one carrying the invisible weight, whether they ever stop in the middle of their day and feel your absence the way you sometimes feel theirs. And that question can become its own kind of suffering. Do they remember? Do they miss me? Do they feel the pull? Did I imagine the depth? Was it real if they could stay away? Can someone love you and still choose silence? Those questions do not have easy answers. Twin flame separation rarely gives you clean answers. It gives you mirrors. It gives you silence. It gives you space. It gives you enough distance to see what closeness kept confusing. And at first, that distance can feel like destruction. Like the bond has been broken. Like the universe showed you something sacred, then took it away. Like you were allowed to glimpse home only to be left outside the door. There is a grief in that. A very specific grief. Not just losing a person. Losing the version of life you started to believe was possible with them. The conversations you imagined. The healing you thought would happen together. The honesty you hoped would finally come. The moment where both of you would stop running, stop hiding, stop pretending, and simply say, I feel it too. Maybe you waited for that moment. Maybe part of you still does. Even if you do not admit it out loud. Even if you have told yourself you are moving forward. Even if you have done the healing, the journaling, the prayers, the boundaries, the letting go. Somewhere inside, there may still be a quiet room where that possibility sits. Not controlling you like before, but present, soft, unresolved. And that is what makes separation so complicated. You can be healing and still remember. You can be moving forward and still feel the bond. You can love yourself now and still miss them sometimes. You can know you deserve peace and still wonder what might have happened if both of you had been ready. That does not mean you are weak. It means you are human. It means something touched you deeply enough that your soul did not file it away as ordinary. And maybe it was not ordinary. Maybe the connection was real. Maybe the eye contact did mean something. Maybe the timing was not random. Maybe the dreams, the pull, the emotional recognition, the sense of familiarity, maybe all of it pointed to a bond that had depth. But here is the deeper revelation. Depth is not proven by constant contact. Sometimes depth is tested by separation, not destroyed. Tested. Tested by silence. Tested by distance. Tested by the absence of control. Tested by whether love can mature without possession. Tested by whether you can honor a connection without clinging to a version of it that harms you. Tested by whether both souls can grow when they are no longer using each other to avoid themselves. Because closeness can hide a lot. It can hide dependency. It can hide fear. It can hide fantasy. It can hide the fact that one person is chasing while the other is running. It can hide the emotional imbalance underneath the chemistry. It can make you feel like movement is progress, when sometimes movement is just repetition. Another message. Another high. Another disappearance. Another apology. Another almost. Another emotional spiral. Another moment where you mistake relief for healing. Separation interrupts the cycle. It removes the constant stimulation. No more daily emotional weather. No more trying to decode every tone. No more measuring your worth by their response. No more feeding the bond through urgency. No more using contact as proof that something sacred still exists. And when contact disappears, what remains? That is the test. Not a test to punish you. A test to reveal the substance underneath the attachment. What remains when you are not chasing? What remains when they are not validating the connection? What remains when there is no message to analyze, no sign to cling to, no reunion to fantasize about for relief? What remains when all you have is your own heart and the quiet truth of what the connection awakened in you? That question is sacred. And sometimes the answer is uncomfortable. Sometimes what remains is love. Sometimes what remains is grief. Sometimes what remains is attachment withdrawal. Sometimes what remains is anger. Sometimes what remains is the realization that you were holding on not only to them, but to the version of yourself who felt alive through the connection. Sometimes what remains is the younger part of you that thought, if this person comes back, it will prove I was not abandoned. That is raw, but it is honest. Separation has a way of stripping love down to its roots. It asks, is this love or is this need? Is this devotion or is this fear? Is this soul remembrance or is this your nervous system trying to complete an old wound? Can you love without controlling? Can you release without denying? Can you surrender without secretly bargaining? That last one is difficult, because many of us say we have surrendered, but what we really mean is, I have stopped chasing, but I am still waiting. I am quiet now, but I still want them to feel my silence. I am healing, but part of me hopes healing will bring them back. I am letting go, but I keep looking over my shoulder to see if the universe noticed. Again, no shame. That is the human part of the spiritual journey. The part where your mouth says peace, but your heart still wants proof. The part where you want to release, but you also want the story to mean what you hoped it meant. The part where you tell yourself, whatever is meant will be, while secretly praying that what is meant is still them. Separation exposes that. Gently sometimes, brutally at other times. It shows you where surrender is real and where surrender is still a strategy. It shows you where your love is clean and where your longing still wants control. It shows you whether you can bless someone's path even if that path does not immediately lead back to you. And that hurts. Because sacred love is not supposed to be about possession, but the human heart wants closeness. The human heart wants arms, words, presence, clarity. The human heart wants to hear, I miss you too. The human heart wants the person who awakened all this emotion to also help soothe it. But twin flame separation often asks you to do something harder. It asks you to stop using the other person as the only medicine for the wound they revealed. Read that slowly. Stop using the other person as the only medicine for the wound they revealed. They may have awakened the wound. They may have mirrored it. They may have brought it to the surface. But they cannot be the only place you go to heal it. If their presence is the only thing that calms you, then separation will feel unbearable. But if you learn to calm yourself, witness yourself, choose yourself, and return to yourself, separation becomes something different. Still painful, but no longer powerless. You begin to understand that the bond was never meant to replace your relationship with your own soul. It was meant to bring you back to it. And this is where the depth is tested. Can you keep loving yourself when the person you love is absent? Can you keep growing when there is no guarantee of reunion? Can you keep your heart open without leaving the door open to the old cycle? Can you let the connection breathe without forcing it to become your preferred outcome? Can you accept that a bond can be real and still need distance to mature? These are not easy questions. They are the kind of questions that sit with you at night. The kind that appear when you are tired of pretending you are unaffected. The kind that rise when you see their name somewhere and your body reacts before your mind can catch it. A small jolt, a quick breath, a tightening in the stomach, a rush of memory, and then the pause, the sacred pause, the moment where the old you would have spiraled, checked, reached, interpreted, chased, but the healed part of you whispers, let the feeling pass through. You do not have to follow it. That is separation teaching maturity, not numbness. Maturity. There is a difference. Numbness says, I feel nothing. Maturity says, I feel this deeply and I will not let it choose for me. Numbness closes the heart. Maturity steadies the heart. Numbness denies the bond. Maturity honors the bond without becoming enslaved by it. And maybe you are learning that now. Maybe you are learning how to miss someone without making missing a command. How to remember someone without returning to the wound. How to feel the pull without handing over your peace. How to let love exist without turning it into obsession. This is a quiet kind of strength. The kind no one sees. The kind that happens when you are alone in your room, tempted to check, tempted to reach. Tempted to reopen the door, and instead you breathe. You place a hand over your chest. You let the ache be there. You do not shame it. You do not romanticize it. You just say softly, I can feel this and still choose peace. That sentence can save you. Because separation does not always end the feeling. Sometimes it teaches you how to hold the feeling differently. At first, the feeling holds you. It controls your mood, your choices, your attention, your hope, your sense of worth. But over time, through solitude, through silence, through painful self-return, something changes. You begin to hold the feeling. You become the container. The love may still be there, but it no longer floods the whole house. The memory may still visit, but it no longer moves in. The longing may still rise, but it no longer becomes your identity. This is how the bond matures inside you. It becomes less about craving contact and more about embodying the lesson. Less about when will they return, and more about who am I becoming through this. Less about do they feel it too, and more about can I honor what I feel without abandoning myself. That is a profound shift, and it does not mean you stop believing. It means belief became less desperate. It means love became less attached to proof. It means you stopped needing the connection to behave a certain way in order for your life to continue. This is where separation begins to reveal its sacred purpose. It gives both souls a chance to meet themselves without the intensity of the other person's presence. Because let's be honest, when twin flames are close before they are ready, the energy can be overwhelming. Beautiful, yes, but overwhelming. One look can stir everything. One conversation can reopen the entire field. One moment of warmth can undo weeks of detachment. One silence can send both people back into fear. The connection has voltage. And if the inner wiring is not strong enough, closeness can create chaos instead of union. So separation becomes space. Not empty space. Developmental space. Space for the runner to face what they avoid. Space for the chaser to reclaim what they abandoned. Space for the nervous system to settle. Space for the soul to integrate what the connection awakened. Space for fantasy to dissolve. Space for truth to remain. This is not glamorous, but it is necessary, because a bond that cannot survive space is not ready to survive closeness. Let that settle. A bond that cannot survive space is not ready to survive closeness. If the connection only feels real when someone is texting, calling, touching, validating, or feeding it, then the bond may still be tangled with dependence. But if something remains after the noise fades, not obsession, not panic, not waiting, something quieter, a steady tenderness, a recognition, a prayer for their healing that does not require access, a love that no longer needs to interrupt your life, a sense that what happened changed you, even if the future remains unknown. Then separation has revealed something deeper. The bond was not destroyed. It was being purified. Purified from control, from fantasy, from attachment, from the runner-chaser wound, from the need to turn every ache into action, from the belief that love must possess in order to be real. And sometimes what remains after purification is not what you expected. Maybe the bond remains, but your relationship to it changes. Maybe you still love them, but you no longer want the old dynamic. Maybe you still feel connected, but you are no longer willing to live suspended. Maybe you still believe there is something sacred, but you no longer need to force it into timing. Maybe you realize that reunion without growth would not be a blessing. It would be a repetition. That realization changes the way you pray. You stop praying, bring them back. You begin praying, bring what is true. Bring what is healed. Bring what can hold peace. Bring what is honest enough to stay. Bring them only if both of us can meet without reopening the same wound. That is a different level of love. A love that cares more about truth than possession. A love that does not want reunion at the cost of regression. A love that understands closeness is only sacred when it is conscious. And that kind of love may be the real test of separation. Can you love someone enough to not force them before they are ready? Can you love yourself enough to not wait in pain while they become ready? Can you honor the bond enough to stop feeding its wounded expression? Can you trust that what is meant will not require you to abandon your dignity to keep it alive? These questions separate fantasy from sacred maturity. Fantasy says, if they are my twin flame, they must come back exactly how I want. Maturity says, if this bond is sacred, it must be allowed to become true, not forced to become comfortable. Fantasy says, their return will heal me. Maturity says, my healing cannot depend on their return. Fantasy says, separation means I am losing them. Maturity says, separation is revealing whether the connection can grow beyond attachment. And that is not easy to accept. Some days you may accept it fully. Other days, your heart may still ache for the simpler version. The one where they just text. Where they say the words. Where they show up at the door. Where all the spiritual lessons pause for a moment and you finally get to be held. There is nothing wrong with wanting that. You are not less awakened because you want love to be tangible. You are not less spiritual because you want consistency. You are not less evolved because separation hurts. The body was made for connection. The heart was made to be met. The soul may understand distance, but the human in you still longs for presence. Both are allowed. The goal is not to shame the longing. The goal is to stop letting longing rule the journey. You can say, I miss them. You can say, I wish things were different. You can say, this still matters to me. You can say, some days I still wonder. And then you can also say, I will not abandon myself in the wondering. That is the balance. Tenderness and strength. Love and self-respect. Hope and reality. Spiritual trust and human boundaries. This balance is what separation is teaching. Because before, maybe you lived at extremes. Either you were fully attached, or you tried to cut everything off. Either you believed they were your destiny, or you told yourself you were foolish for feeling anything. Either you waited completely, or you tried to convince yourself it meant nothing. But mature love lives in a more honest place. It says, this connection affected me. I will not deny it. I will not worship it. I will not force it. I will not let it consume my life. I will allow what is true to reveal itself through time, growth, and action. That is a grounded way to hold a sacred bond. Not dramatic. Not obsessive. Not avoidant. Grounded. And that groundedness changes your energy. It turns longing into presence. It turns pain into insight. It turns separation into initiation. You begin to see that the distance was not only about them being away from you. It was about you coming closer to yourself. Closer to your own body. Your own intuition. Your own standards. Your own life. Your own ability to love without disappearing. And maybe they're going through their own version of that too. Maybe separation is pressing on their hidden places. Maybe your absence is making them confront the parts of themselves they could avoid when you were still reaching. Maybe they are seeing the difference between comfort and connection, between distraction and depth, between what they can control and what they cannot forget. Maybe they are realizing that running from the mirror does not erase what the mirror revealed. Maybe, but you cannot build your peace on maybe. You can hold compassion for their journey without making their journey your home. You can believe they are growing without pausing your own life to monitor it. You can pray for their healing without making yourself emotionally responsible for it. That is important, because in separation, the mind can create entire stories. They are waking up. They are thinking of me. They are about to reach out. They are scared. They are watching. They are feeling everything. Maybe some of it is true. Maybe none of it is. The point is not to obsess over what you cannot know. The point is to become honest with what you can know. How are you living? Are you healing? Are you returning to yourself? Are you still waiting in disguise? Are you using their possible feelings to avoid your own present reality? Are you letting separation deepen you, or are you letting it suspend you? That last question matters. Separation can deepen you, or it can suspend you. It deepens you when it brings you into self-awareness. It suspends you when you stop living while waiting for reunion. It deepens you when you reclaim your energy. It suspends you when every day becomes a silent countdown to their return. It deepens you when you learn to love without control. It suspends you when you use spiritual signs to avoid accepting present behavior. It deepens you when your heart becomes more honest. It suspends you when hope becomes a place to hide from grief. So ask yourself gently, has this separation made me more alive? Or has it made me disappear into waiting? No judgment, just truth. Because truth is what sets the energy free. If you realize you have been waiting, breathe. Do not shame yourself. Waiting often comes from a part of you that is still afraid to let life move forward without certainty. It is the part that says, if I move on, what if I lose the bond? But a real bond does not require you to freeze your life to prove loyalty. A sacred connection does not need you to stay emotionally unavailable to your own future. If it is true, your growth will not destroy it. Your peace will not destroy it. Your life moving forward will not destroy it. What is meant for your soul does not require you to betray your life to preserve it. Read that again. What is meant for your soul does not require you to betray your life to preserve it. Separation is asking you to trust that. Not blindly, not passively, but deeply. Trust enough to live. Trust enough to heal. Trust enough to open your hands. Trust enough to stop gripping the connection so tightly that love cannot breathe. Because sometimes the grip is what keeps the pain alive. You keep checking. Keep remembering. Keep rehearsing the future. Keep imagining the conversation. Keep asking the universe for signs. Keep reopening the emotional file. And every time, the wound stays fresh. At some point, separation invites you to loosen the grip. Not erase them. Not deny the bond. Just loosen. Let the connection rest in the hands of truth. Let your heart rest in the hands of God, the universe. Your higher self, whatever language feels honest to you. Let your life return to your own care. Let the person walk their path without your energy following them like a shadow. Let the bond breathe. If it is real, it does not need to be strangled by fear. And if it is not ready, fear will not make it ready faster. That is hard, but it is freeing. You begin to understand that surrender is not losing. Surrender is releasing the illusion that control was ever love. Surrender is saying, I cannot force another soul to meet me. I cannot make someone ready. I cannot heal their fear by abandoning myself. I cannot turn silence into certainty. I cannot keep suffering just to prove I care. I can only become honest. I can only become whole. I can only let what is true come in a true way. That is surrender. Not passive waiting. Active self-return. And once you begin living that way, separation stops being only an ache. It becomes a teacher. It teaches you that love can exist without possession. That longing can rise without ruling you. That silence can reveal what contact concealed. That distance can mature what intensity awakened. That the deepest bonds are not always measured by constant access, but by transformation. Who did you become because of this connection? Did it make you more conscious? Did it make you face your wounds? Did it teach you your worth? Did it reveal where you abandon yourself? Did it show you the difference between love and attachment? Did it break your addiction to almost love? Did it bring you closer to your own soul? If yes, then separation did not destroy the bond. It revealed its deeper purpose. Maybe that purpose includes reunion. Maybe it includes a future conversation. Maybe it includes healing on both sides and a new beginning that looks nothing like the old cycle. Maybe. But even before that is known, the connection has already done something sacred. It awakened you. It shook the sleeping places. It brought hidden wounds to the surface. It forced you to stop mistaking intensity for intimacy. It taught you that love without self-abandonment is possible. It showed you that the person you were chasing was never the only one you needed to return to. You needed to return to yourself. And perhaps that is the greatest test of separation. Can the bond lead you back to yourself instead of away from yourself? Can the absence make you more whole instead of more desperate? Can the love become cleaner when control is removed? Can the memory become wisdom instead of a prison? Can the pain become a doorway instead of an identity? These are the questions that sacred separation asks. Quietly, again and again, in the morning, at night, in the car, in the silence after a dream, in the moment you almost reach out, in the moment you choose yourself instead, and with every choice you answer. Not with words, with energy, with behavior, with the way you return to your life, with the way you let your heart stay open without letting it bleed for a pattern that has already taught you enough. This is how separation tests the depth. Not by asking whether you still feel something. Feeling something is not the whole test. The deeper test is, can you feel something and still remain free? Can you love and still remain grounded? Can you miss and still remain alive? Can you honor the bond and still honor your peace? Can you allow divine timing without turning your life into a waiting room? That is maturity. And maybe as you grow into this maturity, the bond changes too. It becomes less frantic, less tangled, less painful, more spacious, more honest, more surrendered. You may still feel them sometimes, but it is not the same ache. It is softer, cleaner, like a memory that no longer demands action. Like a thread you can acknowledge without wrapping it around your throat. Like a quiet knowing that whatever is true will not require panic to find you. That is peace. Not the absence of love, the purification of love. And once you taste that peace, even for a moment, you realize something powerful. You do not want the old connection back. Not as it was. You do not want the version where you were anxious, waiting, overgiving, decoding, and hoping one sign would become consistency. You do not want the version where their silence made you question your worth. You do not want the version where love felt sacred, but your body felt unsafe. If there is reunion, you want truth. If there is contact, you want maturity. If there is a future, you want mutual presence. If there is love, you want love that can breathe. And if that cannot happen yet, you are willing to let separation continue its work. Not because it does not hurt, because you finally understand that closeness without readiness would hurt more. That is a hard wisdom. The kind you earn through nights nobody sees. The kind you earn when you do not send the message. The kind you earn when you stop using spiritual signs to reopen emotional wounds. The kind you earn when you choose your life even with love still in your heart. And one day, you may look back at the separation differently. You may still remember the pain. You may still respect the ache, but you will also see what it gave you. It gave you clarity. It gave you discernment. It gave you yourself. It taught you that love is not destroyed by space if it is rooted in truth. It taught you that a connection does not need constant contact to remain meaningful. It taught you that the bond's highest purpose is not to keep you attached, but to make you conscious. And consciousness changes everything. It changes what you accept, what you chase, what you call love, what you call destiny, what you call sacred. You stop worshiping the connection and start honoring the transformation. You stop asking only, will they come back? You start asking, if they come back, can we meet differently? And if they do not, can I still become the person this journey awakened me to be? That is where your power returns. Not in controlling the outcome. In becoming the version of yourself that no longer needs to betray peace to prove love. Chosen one, separation was not sent to destroy the bond. It was sent to test what the bond was made of. To separate love from attachment. Soul recognition from emotional hunger. Surrender from waiting. Hope from fantasy. Peace from avoidance. Depth from dependency. It was sent to show you whether the connection could exist without control. Whether you could honor it without chasing. Whether they could feel it without your constant pursuit. Whether both souls could grow when the old dynamic was no longer being fed. And if the bond is real, separation cannot erase what is true. It can only expose what is not ready. It can only purify what has been distorted. It can only make the space where truth must either rise or fall away. That is why your solitude mattered. That is why the silence mattered. That is why the space mattered. Every quiet night was not empty. Every unanswered question was not meaningless. Every moment you chose yourself instead of the cycle was not wasted. You were becoming someone who could hold love without controlling it. Someone who could feel the sacred without losing the self. Someone who could let the connection breathe without using pain as proof. And after all the silence, after all the clearing, after all the emotional shedding, you begin to understand why solitude had to come first. Before sacred love could be received, the room had to be cleared. Before union could be possible, self-abandonment had to end. Before your twin flame could meet you in truth, you had to become someone who could stand in truth alone. And that brings us to the final chapter. The moment where everything begins to make sense. Because your solitude was not a waiting room. It was not punishment. It was not proof that love had forgotten you. It was sacred preparation for a love you could finally receive. Lesson of this chapter. Separation does not always mean the bond was false. Sometimes it means the bond needed space to mature. The emotional truth is simple. Separation tests the depth by removing control. It shows the difference between love and attachment, surrender and waiting, sacred connection and emotional dependency. You can miss someone and still choose peace. You can feel a bond and still live your life. You can honor what awakened you without becoming a prisoner of it. If the connection is real, space will not destroy it. It will reveal what is true, what is immature, what needs healing, and what can only return in a higher form. Separation was not meant to erase love. It was meant to purify it. Chapter 10. Your solitude was sacred preparation for a love you could finally receive. There comes a moment when you stop asking, why was I alone? Not because the question never hurt. It did. It hurt in places you could not always explain. It hurt in the quiet mornings when you woke up and realized nobody had checked on you. It hurt in the nights when your room felt too still. It hurt when you watched other people seem to move easily through love, friendship, connection, and belonging while your own life felt like one long emotional winter. And for a long time, you may have thought solitude meant you were being delayed, held back, forgotten, maybe even punished. You looked at the empty spaces in your life and wondered what they said about you. Why did they leave? Why didn't it work? Why did I have to feel something so deep only to be separated from it? Why did love awaken me and then disappear into silence? But slowly, after all the grieving, after all the clearing, after all the nights you wanted to go back but didn't, after all the times you chose peace with shaking hands, a different question begins to rise. Not, why was I alone? But, who did I become while I was alone? Pause there. Because that question changes everything. Your solitude was not just a season of waiting. It was a season of becoming. It was where you learned how to stop begging for emotional crumbs. Where you learned that silence is not always abandonment. Where you learned that love should not require you to disappear. Where you learned that a sacred connection still needs human responsibility. Where you learned that missing someone does not mean you must chase them. You became more honest. Not colder. more honest. You began to see the difference between being chosen and being used for comfort, between chemistry and chaos, between longing and love, between spiritual intensity and emotional safety, between someone recognizing your soul and someone being ready to honor it. That kind of clarity is not small. It is sacred. Maybe you still have tender days. Days when a memory returns. A song plays. A familiar hour of the night opens something inside you. And suddenly you remember their eyes, their voice, the almost moments, the feeling that something unspoken lived between you. You may still wonder what they felt. You may still wonder if the connection will return. You may still wonder whether your twin flame is healing somewhere in their own silence, facing the mirror your love once placed in front of them. That is human. Do not shame the part of you that still feels. Healing does not mean the heart becomes empty. Healing means the heart no longer abandons itself because it feels. There is a difference. A beautiful one. Chosen one, your solitude was sacred because it taught you how to hold love without worshiping pain. It taught you that not every absence means rejection. Some absences are protection. Some endings are preparation. Some closed doors are not there to punish you, but to keep you from walking back into a version of yourself you already outgrew. And maybe this is the truth you were not ready to hear at the beginning. The love you were praying for could not meet the version of you who still accepted less than truth. Not because you were unworthy. You were always worthy. But your nervous system was still calling chaos familiar. Your heart was still confusing almost love with destiny. Your spirit was still trying to make a home out of people who only knew how to visit. Your soul was still crowded with unfinished attachments, unanswered questions, and old emotional contracts you had not yet released. So life made space. It cleared people who could not come with you. It quieted the noise. It removed the distractions. It brought you face to face with yourself. Not to break you, to return you, to yourself, to your body, to your truth, to the love inside you that had been waiting for you to stop giving it away to places that could not hold it. And now you are not the same. Still soft, still tender, still capable of loving deeply, but different. You no longer mistake anxiety for intuition as easily as before. You no longer call inconsistency mysterious just because it feels intense. You no longer turn every silence into a sentence about your worth. You no longer believe that love must be chased to be real. You have become someone who can say, I can love you and still choose myself. I can miss you and still live my life. I can honor the bond and still refuse the cycle. I can remain open to reunion without making waiting my identity. That is maturity. That is sacred preparation. That is the version of you solitude was shaping. And if your twin flame returns, let them meet this version of you. Not the version who begs. Not the version who over-explains. Not the version who accepts half-truths because the connection feels powerful. Let them meet the version of you who has peace now. The version who has boundaries. The version who can look into their eyes, feel the depth, and still ask for honesty. The version who knows that sacred love should awaken the soul without destroying the self. And if they do not return right away, your solitude is still not wasted. Because the purpose of this journey was never only to be chosen by another person. It was to stop abandoning yourself in the name of being chosen. It was to become whole enough to receive love without clinging to it. It was to become grounded enough to recognize love that feels peaceful, not just powerful. It was to become awake enough to understand that union begins within. Before it becomes a relationship, before it becomes a message, before it becomes a reunion, before it becomes two people standing face to face again. Union begins when you stop leaving yourself, when you stop calling pain proof, when you stop shrinking your needs, when you stop waiting for someone else's readiness to give you permission to live. And maybe that is the miracle hidden inside the solitude. You thought you were being emptied, but you were being made spacious. You thought you were losing love, but you were losing what could not hold love. You thought the silence meant nothing was happening, but inside you, everything was changing. Quietly, sacredly, permanently. So tonight, if you are still in the silence, if your heart still aches sometimes, if part of you still wonders whether they feel it too, breathe. You are not behind. You are not forgotten. You are not unlovable. You are being prepared for a version of love that does not require you to abandon your own soul to receive it. And when that love comes closer, whether through your twin flame, through reunion, through healing, or through a deeper return to yourself, you will recognize it differently, not only by the pull, but by the peace, not only by the intensity, but by the honesty, not only by the spiritual signs, but by the way your body can finally exhale. Because the love meant for your soul will not ask you to survive on confusion. It will not require you to live in emotional hunger. It will not make you feel ashamed for wanting clarity, consistency, tenderness, and truth. It will meet the version of you that solitude created. The version who knows their worth. The version who no longer negotiates with almost love. The version who can feel deeply without collapsing. The version who understands that sacred love is not proven by suffering. It is proven by transformation. And look at you. You transformed. Even when nobody saw it. Even when the nights were long. Even when your heart was tired. Even when you wanted to go back. Even when you did not know whether the silence was breaking you or building you. It was building you. Your solitude was sacred. It cleared the room. It purified the longing. It strengthened your heart. It made space for a love you could finally receive without losing yourself inside it. And that is why this was never just loneliness. It was initiation. It was preparation. It was the quiet, holy becoming of someone who can now say, I am ready for love that meets me in truth. Not fantasy. Not fragments. Not fear. Truth. And until that love arrives in its highest form, you are not empty. You are whole. You are not waiting. You are becoming. You are not abandoned. You are being returned to the deepest, most honest version of yourself. So if this message found the part of you that has been healing in silence, write this in the comments. My solitude was sacred. Let it be your declaration. Let it be your reminder. Let it be the moment you stop seeing your lonely season as punishment and start seeing it as preparation. And if this video spoke to your journey, subscribe to this channel. Because the next message may meet you exactly where your soul is quietly asking to be understood. Lesson of this chapter. Your solitude was not a waiting room. It was sacred preparation. It cleared old attachments, broke your addiction to almost love, taught you how to stop abandoning yourself, and made space for love that can meet you in truth. The emotional truth is simple. You were not alone because you were unlovable. You were alone because life was preparing you to receive love without losing yourself. And whether your twin flame returns, transforms, or remains part of your awakening from a distance, the deepest reunion has already begun. You are returning to yourself.